All right, Stephanie, we have quorum. Yep. Okay, good morning, everyone. Ask everybody to take seats, whatever. Thank you, councillors, for here, and we have quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and media may also be audibly and or visually recording this meeting. As a reminder, all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible functions during committee meetings, please, and thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda today?
Through you, Madam Chairman, no, there are none.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Connolly. All in favour? Any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, I'm going to call, we're ahead of schedule, which is always good, Mr. Paul Takala, Chief Librarian and CEO of the Hamilton Public Library, along with Mary Ann Leach, the Board Chair for 2016, and Jennifer Gautry, Board Chair for 2015, so former board member, to provide the presentation for the Hamilton Library Board. Good morning, everyone. You may wish to just comment or name off other members that are here.
Do you want to do it? Yeah, we're very pleased. Good morning, everyone, and Madam Chair. We're very pleased to be here today, and we have here today a number of our managers and several board members as well. And we're going to have our 2016 Board Chair, Mary Ann Leach, and Jennifer Gautry, 2015 Board Chair, give the presentation. But we also have George Gatesy, who's a former Board Chair. We have Claire Wagner, who's a board member. And then we have, I don't think I'll go through all of them, but they're all our great managers that provide awesome service all around the city. And the library is such a great place because of their hard work. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning. So we're pleased to be here to present the 2016 budget. So, just up? Okay, better? Is that better? Okay. So we'll start off with the good news. As you can see from this slide, we are requesting a 1% increase of $293,000 for a net levy of 28.8%. So this is in line with the City of Hamilton's target, the 1% increase target. So we put that right up front, and now you can enjoy the rest of the presentation. So this slide summarizes the budget submissions that we've had in the last 7 years. So you can see from 2010 to 2014, the city's direction was 4%. In aggregate over those years, those 5 years, the library met those targets. Again, in 2015, because of the budget, there was no direction. We had a 1.5% increase in that particular year. And then in 2016, the direction was 1% from the city, and we've met that. So this is our budget overview, the different cost categories that we have. So summary of our proposed operating budget. As I mentioned, the net levy represents a 1% increase and a total of $28.8 million. So that's offset. So there's an offset of revenues of just under $1.8 million. And you'll see in a couple of slides, we're proposing a slight reduction in the FTE count to make those adjustments, or to make that target. Oh, can I go back just one slide? So just a couple of items to highlight here, and I'll speak to them again later in the presentation. Some of the bigger changes in here, we have materials and supplies increasing by $122,000. So those are our books, our digital materials, as well as some specialized materials for the local history and archives collection. Another one of the big items, a big percent change, was a decrease in the vehicle expenses. That's largely due to the adjustments in the price of gas this year. So we were able to see some savings in that particular cost category. In terms of fees, there's a large reduction in the fees in general, and that's largely due to our decreasing fine revenues as we shift from more physical circulation of physical materials to the electronic materials. We'll speak more to those points later in the presentation. So in terms of budget pressures, so meeting this target this year was not easy. We do have a number of budget pressures, and I give an enormous amount of credit to Paul and the senior management team and the whole administration team at the library for being able to pull yet another rabbit out of the hat and deliver the 1% budget. They do a phenomenal amount of work to make sure that city tax dollars are used efficiently and very prudently. So some of the pressures that we have this year, and they're not unique to the library, we have a 2% cost of living increase. We match the city's increases as the city is a comparator. The materials and supply budget I mentioned, $122,000 increase. The largest portion of that is related to specialized supplies that we need for our local history and archives area. We have a $35,000 increase in our security costs. That's largely due to a change in the contract and a different and higher quality of security service that we've had than in the past. We have some additional fees related to city recoveries for both facilities and insurance, so that's an increase in our budget. And as I mentioned, the reduction in fine revenues, we shift from the physical materials being circulated to more digital. So offsetting our budget pressures, we have some positive budget drivers, so decreases. As I mentioned, the vehicle expenses are down, and that's largely due to the change in the price of gas. Our radio frequency identification project, the RFID. So this is a project that we started in 2007 and 2008. We spent, I believe it was over $3 million from library reserves to bring in the technology to allow patrons to check out their own materials. Part and parcel with that was the materials handling system, so automatic sorters for when books are returned. So what that has done is it's now returning dividends every single year. It enables our staff to be freed up from the more manual and routine functions in order to provide more value-added services. And we'll see that in terms of the programming numbers. They're phenomenal. And it allows for, as I said, staff to do other things. They're not always handling materials. The self-checkout rate has been adopted by most of our customers at a rate of 90% system-wide, and that's phenomenal. Other library systems aren't seeing that uptake at quite the same numbers. In 2015, we installed new sorters at Red Hill, Waterdown, and Westdale. So that's what's pictured on the bottom right of the slide, what these sorters look like. So as materials are returned, they go down a belt, they're checked in, and then sorted into different areas, whether they're just being checked to the branch or they're a hold or if there's a problem. Another positive budget driver was the technical services department has been moved back from the Stony Creek location into the basement of our central building. So that will cut down on shipping costs between the two locations. So the technical services department processes our new materials as they come in. So that moving them back to central improves the workflow and the handling of those materials. In addition, we're proposing a small reduction in the full-time equivalent from just over 308 to just under 306. So a reduction of 2.39 FTEs, and that's handled through attrition. So, and as people leave the organization, what happens is there's a lot of rationalization about the different positions. So the library, again, is managing not only the funds efficiently, but the staff efficiently as well, and making sure that the staff is deployed to offer the best possible service we can. So in terms of where we are heading in the future, our future budget challenges, one of the things, the project that we have ongoing is addressing some library service hours. A number of our branches are closed on different days during the week, mostly on Fridays, and that's been a point of tension and frustration with the customers. Paul gives the example of people going to the Ancaster branch, for example, and pulling on the door on a Friday. Well, that location's been closed on a Friday for 30 years. But there's still the expectation that it's a public building and it should be open on Fridays. So we're going to need to look at the hours that we're offering and see if there's ways that we can change those hours. There's also new uses of the library. People are using the locations for not just for taking out materials, but also as meeting space, and they're wanting access to the public access computers and to the Wi-Fi as well. We also still have the tension of maintaining our excellent physical collections while we're growing our digital services. So, and there's costs involved to each. Of course, we want to have those physical collections to remain relevant and responsive for our customers. So, but that's the challenge, the budget challenges. Those items are expensive and in demand. And as I mentioned earlier, the reduction in the fine revenue. So as people shift to using those digital materials, the physical materials aren't circulating as much, and without the circulation of physical collections, to the same extent, they're not keeping them in their homes and accruing fines. So then that fine revenue is decreasing. So we're expecting a gradual reduction in the fine revenue. So here we have a summary of our 2015 staffing and activity. So you can see for the last 3 years, our FTE count has been stable, 309 FTE. Same, the in-person visits are pretty stable at 3.7172 million. Circulation of materials is declining slightly, and that figure includes both the physical and the digital collections. But here's the program attendance. This number has gone up phenomenally, and it continues to increase. So this is the type of value-added programming that we are seeing the staff being able to provide when they're not bogged down in the routine of checking in materials. So that's what the materials handling system allows the staff to do, is to devote their time to other things, such as the program, offering programs. And you can see how well they're appreciated in terms of the program attendance. Library computer sessions, they're on the upswing again. That's largely due to a renewal of the computers in the library facility. So you have some new thin client computers. So that's translated to an increase in the computer session usage again. And number of Wi-Fi sessions, that has just gone up phenomenally as well, especially as the service has improved in the last few years. And I'll turn it over to Marianne to continue.
Good morning. Now I'm a bit shorter than Jennifer. Now I'm going to tell you about some of the things that your library delivers to the City of Hamilton for the money that we're asking you. First, I'll introduce you to your new board. We seated a new board this year. It is comprised of 9 citizens and Councillors Partridge and Pearson, and this board is dedicated to bringing you and ensuring that the library continues to move forward as it has until this point. The library board has 3 strategic priorities. One is we want to be we are a community beacon. The second is we are relevant and responsible. And the third is that we are a creative and changing organizations. These priorities strongly align with the City of Hamilton priorities. As City of Hamilton updates its vision of the future, your public library will keep pace with the City of Hamilton and ensure that our vision of the future aligns with the City of Hamilton vision of the future. There are, wait a minute, I'm missing something. Okay, that's right, sorry. The library is always looking for ways to ensure our work complements the work of others, and we will work closely with the City of Hamilton on many fronts, making our community stronger. We have a history of partnerships. We have something like 140 partnerships going on at the present moment, and I'm sure you don't want to hear all of them, but there are many of them. Wherever we can find a partnership that adds value to the service that we provide, we embark on that partnership. In terms of literacy support, we work with many others to support literacy and the true love of reading. This picture here, the picture you're looking at, the bottom picture actually, shows the backpacks filled with school supplies and a free book brought to students through partnership with Start to Finish, the school board, the library, and many others. It was a great success. The kids were so happy to get those backpacks. They were like, it was like Christmas. Over the past couple of years, we've identified security costs as being one of our budget pressures. And the reason that in response to that as being budget pressure, it's an important issue. We want to report that we have made significant progress towards making our spaces, particularly at Central, making them a welcoming and safe environment for everyone. Everyone feels secure in the library. As a community, it is important that we have places where people from all walks of life and all ages come together. And the library is such a place. It's always been such a place. We always intend for it to be such a place. Welcoming to newcomers to Hamilton has been a long-term priority for the Hamilton Public Library. This year, we're pleased to be part of the response to welcoming our refugees to our community. We were honored to host the Witness Blanket at Central this summer. This was quite an incredible piece of work. I was there and it was just unbelievable. This national art piece was commissioned by the Truth and Reconciliation Committee to bear witness to the tragedy of the residential school system, and really and truly it really brought home the tragedy. The work was located at the Central Library living room on the first floor, and all summer people visited the Central to reflect on this powerful and important piece of work. It sucked you in the stomach. It was a really important piece of work, and it was we're really particularly pleased to be able to bring it to the citizens of Hamilton. In December, we opened the new Waterdown Bridge, and I don't know how many of you have been out there, and I've told Paul this many times, he's tired of hearing it, but the place at night, when you drive by it and it's lit up, it looks like a jewel. It's a jewel. It's just a piece of art more than it is a building. It's a beautiful place. But it's not just beautiful. It serves many purposes as well. First, it's an expanded library. It's much bigger than the library we were able to provide in the old facility in Waterdown. It also houses the Municipal Services Center. It houses a Seniors Recreation Center, and it houses the Flamborough Archives, which Flamborough is very proud of, and we're pleased to provide space for that, and Flamborough Information and Community Services. We're already seeing strong growth in usage at the new branch and expect that to continue. We were there last Wednesday, and it was just a pleasure to see little children, tiny children, learning to use the iPads that were provided for them and sitting with their mothers in the children's area, which is very, very welcoming. It was just a pleasure to see, and it really brought home the reason that we do that kind of thing. We build libraries like that now. They're no longer just rows of books. They have reason to be. Next month, we'll be finishing some important renovations to the Central Library. Our main program room on the first floor is being updated and made fully accessible. The renovation to this room was made possible because of private donors to our funds which are with the Hamilton Community Foundation. And some new exciting technology training and services will be coming to the library's fourth floor. That also is happening sometime this year. We will be opening a new computer lab, 3D printing, a digital media lab, and film and video lab. Now, how much more in the 21st century can you be? I mean, that's really moving forward and keeping up with the times. The programs will be for people of all ages. However, we will have a major focus on helping equip youth with technology skills they need to thrive in the modern workplace. In 2016 is a really exciting year as well. We will have two major construction projects which are slated to begin. The first is to serve the growing community of Binbrook, and we'll be building a new and expanded branch. We're really, really proud of this branch. Binbrook is growing in leaps and bounds and really needs more library space and a better, a more comfortable environment. One of the most popular branches is Dundas, and it will undergo a major renovation that will significantly improve the building's accessibility and layout, and this is also long needed. The staff parking lot on the side of the branch will be turned into a pedestrian walkway and parquet, and we found that parquets are outside space, outdoor space for people who want to have a coffee and read a book are really important. Okay, other projects that we're working on are a major expansion of the Valley Park branch in a different location on the same property. So this is still just in the conceptual stages, but this is something that's on our radar for the future. We are working on improvements to the entrance of the Locke Street branch. Locke may be our smallest branch, but you'd never know it by how much activity happens there. It's a busy little place. The Library Board is excited to be part of a new community hub in Greensville in partnership with the City Recreation Department and the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. That is also something that is really something that is making the Library Board very excited about the future and what's happening with the library in general in Hamilton. As recently as 2011, we had 6 locations that were defined as buildings that could be maintained over the could not be maintained over the long term. That's 6 locations that could not be maintained over the long term. With our current plans and everything we have in the chute and everything we have on the go, that will be reduced to 2 buildings. Our staff are our greatest resource, and that's very, very true. I've learned that very, very clearly. I've seen library staff and how effective they are and how good they are at their jobs and how professional they are. I've seen that since I've been a member of the board, and I am very, very impressed. They help us to realize our mission. Our mission statement is freedom to discover, and that happens through the library staff. They have embraced that mission statement and made it real. Our bookmobile service continues to thrive, and we want to thank councillors for supporting our special celebrations this summer. The staff and board are proud of our history and want to thank council for making it all possible. In 2015, we celebrated 125 years from the day that Lady and Lord Aberdeen dedicated the opening of the first Central Library in 1890. And we're really proud of that. We have a short video that we want to play for you, and then we'll be passed over to you, and then we'll be pleased to answer any questions that you may have. It's really short.
Hi, Boris Brott here. I'm conductor and artistic director of the National Academy Orchestra of Canada, right here in Hamilton, and I want to wish the Hamilton Public Library a fabulous 125th birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Hi, I'm Krista Boss. I'm the author of Smoke River, and I want to wish the Hamilton Public Library happy 125th birthday.
I am Max from the Arkells, and on behalf of the band, we'd love to wish a happy 125th birthday to the Hamilton Public Library. Thank you for providing such a valuable service and place of learning for the community. Keep it up. Many more.
Hey, this is Mark from Dr. Disc, the music store. We just want to wish the HPL a very happy 125th birthday. Our friendly neighbors, many happy returns.
Happy birthday, HPL, from Simon Gunyon.
I'm Craig Watkins. I'm a Hamilton-based filmmaker, and we want to say happy birthday to the Hamilton Public Library. Exactly what he said, except I'm Nathan.
I'm Manola Santanos.
I'm Patrick Coppolino.
And we just want to say happy birthday
to the Hamilton Public Library. And don't worry, it's not your fault Manola's can't read.
It's true.
We are Hamilton's own monster truck, and we wanted to wish the Hamilton Public Library a happy 125th birthday. Anniversary? Birthday.
Books rule!
Hello, on behalf of McMaster Show Child and Youth Mental Health Program, we're here to wish you a happy 125th birthday!
Thank you for being the best library in the world.
Yay, books! Happy birthday to
So I think that shows that we are appreciated. Now, any questions that you may have? Either Jennifer or I.
Marianne and Jennifer. Excellent presentation as always. Proud to be a board member with all the other members and certainly wonderful staff at the library since 2003. I'm going to go to a speakers list, so you'll have questions. I have Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Judy Partridge, Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Tom Jackson. Councillor Johnson.
Yep, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I'm glad you clarified the 43% reduction in vehicle costs because I was worried about the bookmobile. It was an enormous hit in the parks that you sent them to, Summit Park and Winona Park, and the residents were all over this. I hope we can continue that this year coming up and give people lots and lots of notice, because once word gets out that they will be there, it was just phenomenal, and your staff are just terrific. I just want to make a comment about the Pembroke Library. We're really excited about it. We can't wait until it starts. I know we're really busting at the seams there, so it's going to be nice to see something a little bit more up to code and a little bit more friendlier for those who have their computers and the programming that you're wanting to put in there. One of the overlying questions has always been, what will you do in the meantime? So I know that you've been going back and knocking heads together to figure out where this space is going to be accommodated while you're in the construction mode. Has there been any consensus yet as to what's going to happen?
We've been working on an alternate site for both Pembroke and Dundas. We're a little bit further ahead on Dundas and hoping to wrap something up soon. So we don't have anything yet, but we are committed to it, and so we're going to continue to work on that till we find something.
Thank you for that. Now, is it possible, Paul, that a house trailer could be set up, say, at the Pembroke Fairgrounds or something that's accessible, people can drive into if they need to, or even walk? Is that possible that we could just set up, like, I see that Tim Hortons do their trailers all the time, and they seem to function quite well.
That is one of the options that we've been looking at, a trailer or portable, as there are some costs associated with that, so that it's one of the options we're looking at.
Okay, perfect. If you can help in any way, let me know. I'd be happy to make out. So we're really excited about this, and this was all contingent on when we got the sewer and water put through 56 Highway. The entire village of Pembroke is on sewer and water except on the main roads. So now we finally are going to have this infrastructure put into place. So this is what the library's been patiently waiting for. So we're all excited, and thank you very much again. Good all around.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone, and everybody up in the gallery as well. You've got a good, healthy contingent here, and a good presentation. And I'm also very, very proud to be a library board member. And I must commend all of you and to my council colleagues. This organization is so focused on developing technology and not only keeping up with what's currently, but setting, blazing trails, I think is, and actually, could you speak a little bit about that through you, Madam Chair, just how the Hamilton Library is viewed amongst your peers, if you could, please.
The Hamilton Public Library has the distinction of being an international award-winning organization. So we are very highly respected among our peers for being an innovative and changing organization. So in many developments that we have, we're ahead of the curve. We're early adopters in terms of technology, certainly the RFID technology. There are municipalities close to us. Oakville would be one where they're just starting to look at RFID technology. So we take pride in being innovators and ahead of the curve, and I would say other organizations do look to the Hamilton Public Library for leadership and advice in some cases on how to implement things like RFID.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. It's, I think it's such an important point. But, just to be able to look at how we deliver library services, it's no longer the traditional building with rows upon rows of books. It's much more than that, and it is the other element that I think is so important is the partnership element, creating public space. And as our new president alluded to, that includes outdoor space as well. And I think that is so very important. I see it at the Waterdown Library. We've gone from, I think it was 6,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet in Waterdown to something like 15,000 square feet. And it's getting, busier and busier and busier. Waterdown, of course, has exploded, and it will continue over the next 5 years. So the space will be well used. And certainly the technology that's available there, the public space is very welcoming and, will be well utilized. And I commend the library board for the partnership with Greensville. I think having those community hubs in our rural areas is so very important. Being able to look at whether it's the library and the city partnership or the library, the city and the school partnership, creating those public spaces. And so I commend all of you, and particularly staff, because, we get to stand at the podium and we get to look good, but it really is the folks that are behind the scenes, and you, Paul, as well, through your leadership, that that these things happen. So congratulations on your 125th and being as innovative as you are and well respected. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I just want to offer a great thanks and congratulations to Jennifer for your service. I know you don't get paid a big paycheck to do this, and you obviously put a lot of hours in it and got some great successes, so thank you for your service. And of course, I also want to welcome Mary Ann, and it sounds like you have a very aggressive program to manage you and your board and the staff behind us during 2016. Mary Ann's from Lancaster, so that makes her perfect. And, it's interesting that, and this isn't a question, it's a comment, it's interesting that your visitations are stable with the advent of the internet, and so congratulations to that. You're still attracting the public to come into the building, because I think a lot of kids doing projects but used to use the library facilities that can now use the internet at home, but just maintain that visitation. So that's good to see, and I also am pleased to see that you're really embracing technology and reducing costs by doing that, by using automatic check-ins and check-outs. Just on the Ancaster branch, I'm going to get parochial a little bit here. You're actually thinking about opening it up to you, Madam Chairman, to having that branch open on Fridays?
Ideally, that's what would happen. Obviously, there'd be potential costs and that would have to be examined. So, but as I mentioned, the Friday closures, it is a point of tension with the customers, and they're expecting that their library would be open longer hours. So the senior management team is looking at how, can resources be deployed slightly differently so that we can open those branches at low cost, minimum cost, what cost? So this is a project for this year or the coming years to see if we can do this within the budget envelope that we have. If we can't do it within the budget envelope we have, what are the cost implications, and what is our ask from the city to do that? But that is the direction that we're trying to head, is to have the longer opening hours.
As feedback, I had the same question when I first got elected. Why is this branch closed on Fridays? Because it's a busy branch. And we got to do something about those doors, keep it opening and closing. I hope you could lock them out, because it's very distracting, people going up the stairs. But, I thought the same thing. But in recent years, I've not had a single complaint about it. In fact, the people in the Municipal Service Center, the tennis courts, the spray pad, and the lawn bowling green kind of appreciate the extra parking on Fridays. And so it's great that you're looking at it, because I know there's great demand for that facility, but I just wanted to give you some feedback. And lastly, I just want to thank you for your budget. It's very responsible to hit the target, and it's not going unnoticed, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Nobody calls me anymore from the library. For nearly 20 years of service, the farewell dinner, and we've moved on to Councillor Partridge and Councillor Pearson. I'm okay, Paul. Don't worry. I'll be fine. Thank you. Good presentation, outgoing Chair Jennifer and incoming Chair Mary Ann. Could you just put up, Paul, the slide that shows staffing and activity summary, as I'm making a couple of comments and asking just a few questions, Madam Deputy Mayor. Couple of comments. The library, I have sung this refrain, I think, every budget year since amalgamation. Given the pull, the tug of amalgamation, some lingering resentment, although ebbing away hopefully across the larger part of our community. But I've said, Madam Deputy Mayor, every year that if any department, if any city wanted to see how to do an amalgamation correctly with the service, and for Mary Ann, the balance that this chart still shows about our great Hamilton Public Library service. A couple of questions. I saw a couple of pictures of the bookmobile, Paul. It's near and dear to my heart. Just maybe a future reference would be appreciated about the Dowler Foundation. Just for those members of council who may not know, about 15, 17 years ago, a sweet couple that ended up passing away together at Macassa Lodge, Ed and Connie Dowler, D-O-W-L-E-R. They didn't have any children. They left their entire estate, close to, if I recall, about $400,000, earmarked for the library, specifically for the bookmobile service, because there was a time that it was tenuous whether or not to keep the bookmobiles because of some extra costs to keep them on the road. Councillor Brenda Johnson, thank you so much for reinforcing the tremendous popularity that they are, and for shut-ins who simply can't necessarily get out to a branch, but the bookmobile comes to them. So, Paul, Jennifer, Marianne, if you could just, maybe in the future, just a low bullet point on the reference of the Dowler Foundation that kept it going would be appreciated, but I thank you for the pictures that were in your presentation. When all the branches you've mentioned today are upgraded, is your inventory pretty well, Paul, Jennifer, where you want it to be? Are there future projects in the next 5 to 10 year capital plan? Maybe just give me some handle on that, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you, whoever wants to comment on that.
So, as Marianne mentioned, there are two facilities that are, I forget what the terminology is, but there are challenges with the facilities because they can't be renovated properly to comply with the AODA terms. So at present, we do not have plans for those two branches. The rest of the inventory is or will be shortly renovated or rebuilt to be up to code. So both building codes and AODA standards. There's always ongoing renovations that need to be done, so renewal of carpets or paint or the materials for the gondolas, we call them display materials, the shelving, furniture, those kinds of things. So we'll always have those costs, but in terms of major
usage. And when you look at the population in the city, there are gaps, there are gaps to that. And so looking in the longer term, maybe there could be opportunities. I know the issue for us, though, has been up to this point, let's get our current facilities on a sustainable footprint. And then obviously the other issue is we always know council is always very concerned about the operating budget. So if you want to propose an increase in our operating budget to open new branch, Councillor, I'm sure the library board would be very enthusiastic about that.
Thought of doing that, but nobody calls me anymore. No, thank you, Paul and Jennifer, for those comments. Because when I looked at the Central, Bimbrook, Dundas, Lock, Greensvilles, Valley Parks, all up for some form of upgrades and or renewal, I just thought, geez, that's such a great plan. You've accomplished so much on the physical structures. And by the way, again, with the amalgamation issue, every spot, I believe, Madam Deputy Mayor, of our great community has some proximity to a branch, including the outlying areas, the former suburban communities, and the mountain and the lower city, which I think is so key. So thank you. It sounds like your facilities management plan, Paul and Jennifer and Marianne, has been very successful, and we'll come to some conclusion over the next year or two with the ones you've noted today. And lastly, Madam Deputy Mayor, yes, the staff up there they're second to none. They're dynamite. They love what they do. And I want to say, at a time when we talk about renewal on boards and agencies and commissions, the library board has always had a nice mix of continuity, good long-time continuity, which is important for the capital information that comes with historical evidence and feedback and contribution, along with newness. I've always found that come selection committee time, after every municipal election, there are those that have reapplied, and we've got some great continuity of years of service on the board, along with newness, which is, for me, the best combination you can have. So keep up the great work, and they always know they've got an ally in me, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
We know that, Councillor. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to make a few comments. There's no more speakers. If I can, certainly I've ticked off all the things I was going to mention that have been raised, and thank everyone for great comments here today, to Paul, to Jennifer, to Marianne, and all the committee members and staff. Phenomenal group of people to work with. I can't say that loud enough. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've done a lot at the library, and it's funny because you sit there at the meetings, and Tom will know, and Judy, you sit at the meetings, and there are a lot of major decisions, but we seem to have, being so focused and having everything lined up by staff, they're very easy to make responsible decisions. I see head nodding up there as well. And, it's been mentioned about the budgets and hours of operation. I know a councillor last week had an email from a resident with regards to Turner Park and hours. And hours in service are all contingent on budgets. So it's all a matter of the dollars. If we get more dollars, we can do more. But this has been a very, very responsible budget that the staff have put together and that the board has approved and presented today, and I'm very proud of that. Again, we know that technology has been a major factor in not only cost, but in saving us. And with that, staff are constantly raising the bar as far as what we can do for our patrons, and that's wonderful. It's never been a matter raised at the table at board meetings that, well, you know what, we just can't do it. It's impossible, we can't do it. I don't recall ever hearing that come right across, say, no, we just can't do it. It's always been, let's see what we can do. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I think there's one person in this room that I think we should recognize, and that's Karen Anderson. Because Karen is the staff person that always gives us the updates on the renovations, the rebuilds, all the capital improvements that go on with all the facilities. And I don't know how she does it, but she makes it sound so simple. And that things are moving along smoothly, but I'm sure she's pulling her hair out many nights when she goes home. So with that, I wanted our councillors here to understand that it is an absolute pleasure to be on this board. And I can't also forget that I want to also thank the selection committee, because we've had a really good, consistent balance of new members and members coming back that have been able to keep that flow going. And the new members that always come forward are so intent on making sure we continue on the vision that's laid out for us. So with that, I want to thank everyone again. And on that, may I have a motion now to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Partridge. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very, very much. So now we're going to go on to, and I think I will, Councillor, just give me a second. I know you did. On the board, library?
No.
Okay.
Is there any reason why clerks can't lock out these doors?
She
so when
can.
people going up and
We
down
can
the
have her
stairs,
do that. Yeah, we can have her
activates
do
them?
that.
So could you ask her to lock them out before the police starts acting with those doors opening and closing, with everybody heading up and down the stairs?
Hang on.
We do have the empty rooms for members of council to go out.
Okay, so I have Councillor Farr on that.
As you may recall from Planning Committee, we debated this already. I felt unanimity around the table at that point. It was the first standing committee. Appreciate where you're coming from. I'm not at all distracted. I'm hopeful most people are not, and most people are appreciating the whole purpose of these doors and the accessibility issue around it. I think if we had to choose one or the other, I'd rather not have the optics of these doors being locked as opposed to being just a little distracted, because being locked means that they're not accessible, and they're supposed to be accessible anytime we're in standing committee in these chambers or otherwise. So I couldn't support at all ever locking these doors. This was a major capital project. It took probably over a month, and the whole purpose was to have these doors available to the public who needs these doors available to them at any time we're in standing committee or otherwise. I can't support that.
Okay, so Councillor,
I talked to the accessibility office and we gave direction. I wanted to move a motion in the planning committee, as you know, and you said no, direction is fine. So I wouldn't at all support locking them anytime we are in, unless we're in camera, I guess.
Mr. Mayor.
So just on that, I mean, I agree. This was done for a reason. That was accessibility. So if we lock them out, then we're no longer accessible, and people have to go around. That doesn't make any sense. But adjusting the sensors, if we can do that,
that's what I
think the sensitivity of that is pretty significant, actually. So you know, if you're within 10 feet of those doors, the door is open. So I think that's a first step. Let's see if we can get that adjusted. But beyond that, I mean, it was done to provide accessibility, and certainly if they're locked, they're not accessible. So that doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me. I can personally live with it.
Thank you. And I think, and I was going to talk to the clerk after this meeting, because I see the frustration around the table every time the doors open and close. They have tried to reduce this spacing so that it's only a half opening when somebody trips the motion detector. And I think what we can do is maybe, and I'll ask his direction to the clerk, is that maybe we can see if they can reduce the area that the motion detectors can pick up. And as I mentioned at a previous meeting, that new carpeted area, if any councillors are walking across, if you walk in that area, that trips that motion detector. So it's the same on the other side. So if we can reduce that sight line, that might be helpful. So it doesn't catch the people going to the staircase.
Through you, Madam Chairman, you haven't been able to see your email this morning because you're in the chair as well, and you don't usually refer to it while you're in the meeting. But I did send out an email this morning because I knew physically and technically I was in between two different requests. Yes, between a door and a hard place. So I did send out an email this morning advising that Councillor Farr had said that he had already requested facilities to look at adjusting the sensors, and I copied Rome and other people to look at it during the review of the council chambers when they look at the equipment. So.
Thank you, Stephanie. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I don't want to ever suggest that we limit access here.
We understand.
Just pushing a button can unlock if someone comes up with a wheelchair and can't open it. And the clerk can just touch that and it'll open. If they can adjust the sensors, that would be the perfect solution, because every time someone goes up those stairs, it activates. And that happens all day long during these meetings, and somehow address that. So
got it.
I don't know what we do during the police presentation. I want to put it to a vote.
We'll deal with it.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, it is an option either way. I do have the option to just at the push of a button open the door. It's whatever committee wishes. I'm good.
Councillor Basuda.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor Pearson. I remember moving the motion back in 2012 in the fall. Councillor Brad Clark seconded it. Sitting here watching the people coming to the doors couldn't access here in the wheelchairs and the scooters. This is what we wanted. But the operation method is not what I was looking at. Typically, other places have push buttons, bars, you go to them. That's what I was hoping was going to be here on the outside and on the inside. I don't know who had discussions with staff or how this was planned to do it the way it is. I mean, when we go in camera, it's great the way it comes down and everything happens, because the other way was bad too, but this is not what I expected, and I can tell you it is disturbing for me too. I don't want to stop accessibility, but the point was I was hoping we were going to have a tab, a bar, or something out there on a post out there and in here. It was more money than I had expected too, and I haven't found out the total cost, but I heard it's a lot, but it's not quite the way I had envisioned it, nor Councillor Clark, and I think maybe my colleagues, this automatic thing and the lines and that. So just my comment, personally I think it was done for a purpose, but it wasn't done well. Thank you.
Okay, so the clerk has expressed that staff will be looking at that. I don't think they can put one of those controls on it because it means an arm and then they can't open it completely anymore, because that becomes a permanent fixture to the door and it can only go so far as these push button systems. But we'll leave it in the clerk's hand and maintenance. Hopefully we can get it rectified and before the next meeting. But now I'd like to move on to the Hamilton Police Services Board presentations. I'm going to welcome Acting Chief Eric Gert to the podium. And Councillor Ferguson, you want some opening comments, sir?
Yeah, I'm just going to make some brief opening comments, and then we'll invite the Acting Chief Gert to come forward and present the budget for the police services. You know, the budget process for the Hamilton Police Services is all about guaranteeing and ensuring community safety, but with fiscal responsibility. And on December the 11th, 2015, the board debated our budget and unanimously supported the recommendation. The 2016 Hamilton Police budget is the lowest in 17 years, and with a 2.79% increase. It does include 7.5 new staff to deal with the issues of the day, which is we're bringing in, and Eric will be explaining this in much more detail, 3 sworn members, one additional sworn for crimes against seniors, which is a continuing problem with the aging population. 1 more person in the civilian and victim services branch, and 2.5 civilian members in HR to deal with to deal with member wellness of our employees. So, at this point, Madam Chairman, I'll turn it over to Acting Chief Gert to do the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. And Chief, good morning. Acting Chief Gert.
Morning.
And I don't know if you want to recognize some of your members and colleagues here in the council chambers also this morning.
I will. Thank you. If you give me a moment to set up. I didn't want to disturb you in the other session, so I'll just take a moment to do that.
You want me to talk a little longer?
You're not getting the other USB? Only USB ports. Now it's got it. All set? Thank you, Madam Chair. Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and our senior command who's here as well. Today I'm proud to present the 2016 operating budget of the Hamilton Police Service. For continuity's sake, I did not vary from the presentation that Glenn DeCare presented to the board, so you have consistency in that. I may have made modifications, but you will see a number of statistics and those type of things. But in the interest of being consistent in terms of this presentation, that's why it's done that way. So first of all, thank you to the men and women, civilian and sworn, of our service. The professionalism of our members continues to pay off in reductions in crime, violence, and reduced victimization. We are focused on and appreciative of the many partnerships we have developed over the years. These partnerships produce greater levels of security for our citizens. The command of the Hamilton Police Service recommended to the Police Services Board that they approve the 2016 operating budget, which is the lowest percentage budget request of the last 17 years. While achieving this major milestone, we are able to improve supervision, risk management, and service delivery. With the addition of these critical staff positions, Community Mobilization Branch, we have 3 sworn positions, Crimes Against Senior Unit, and we brought a business case in November of last year. Prior to this, the Victim Services Branch and our Member Wellness Unit. And again, that was presented as a board presentation for changes within our own organization. And here's the unit here. It's a Community Mobilization Division, and you'll notice it's rather victim-centric. So whether it's Victim Services itself, Crime Stoppers, our Core Patrol, of course, our COAST, which are Crisis and Outreach Support Team, and of course the newer MCERT, which is our Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, all housed in that same division. Section 31 of the Police Services Act mandates to the board to provide adequate and effective police services in the municipality, and the board shall submit its operating budget to the municipal council, which is why we're here today. The budget is established to allow the service to achieve the 5 principles of Section 4 of the Police Services Act, also listed here. And again, you'll see it focuses on crime prevention, law enforcement, assistance to victims of crime, our public order maintenance, and of course emergency response. The budget is established to allow the service to achieve those 5 principles, and the responsibility is the municipalities to provide the infrastructure to complete that. Our budget is impacted by legislative changes, demographic changes, and you'll see some of them here. Obviously, aging population, increasing diversity, changes in our own policies and procedures in the court decisions, and of course the changing context of crime. With the information technology, globalization, the elimination of borders at a global level, and internet victimization, these present very real and significant challenges. Some additional growing concerns, and we see it most recently with the Cirillo finding, relationship between the police and the public, particularly with mental health issues and addictions issues, homelessness, obviously rising police costs in line with increases in public health expenditures. What you'll notice at the bottom, over the last 10 years, the HPS budget as a percentage of the city levy has remained consistent at around 19%. So looking at the Hamilton context, our economy is growing, is the fastest growing economy in Ontario. And we've had it reported a number of times in a number of publications, the best place to invest in Ontario over the next 5 years. Labor market, and of course the housing demands. The last 6 years have been witnessed to over $1 billion in building permits. Housing completions in the last 5 years total over 9,300. With 2.5 persons per household, OMBI, a resident population change of approximately 23,400 has taken place. We have one of the lowest ratios of police officers to population ratios, about 153, call it the cop to pop ratio, per 100,000. These housing investments would have required the hiring of 36 officers, and we have not necessarily kept pace with that demand. In addition, our roads have increased at a rate of 1% per year, and we patrol in excess of 6,500 kilometers of roadway. Most recently, of course, the Red Hill and the Lincoln Alexander have garnered quite a bit of attention. Since 2009, the City of Hamilton has seen an increase of over 28,000 motor vehicles registered in our city. In this relentless pursuit of offenders, we have been working on our crime analysis and crime mapping, our offender management, and the idea there is to get to compliance before we have people reoffend, fugitive apprehension, our problem-oriented policing projects, which are predominantly around traffic, but also disorderly conduct, and our parks, and a whole range of things. Law enforcement initiatives, our stop checks, which is our strategic targeted offender program around our highest risk youth, and of course drug sweeps. We just recently completed our business planning for the next 3 years. We have extensive internal and external committees. Our action strategy, which we're well aware of, the Social Navigator program, now tied in under community mobilization with both Coast and the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. Of course, we have the multi-agency training facility up off of Stonechurch, and our victim services has had international awards over the years, including the Weber Seavey Award. Crime prevention strategy, our traffic enforcement, and we expand and continue to do so on social media, and of course our firearms amnesty program. So towards cost reductions and efficiency measures, we can continue on that journey as well. It's not just about increasing staff, but looking for those efficiencies in-house. So we've looked at our programs, our case preparation unit, which went from completing a case brief in a little over 4 hours to a little over an hour, which realized a saving of 12 people per year. Our attendance management system, which we're implementing now, property management, our records management systems, and you can see the rest up there. And we also plan for the future here as well, whether it's the ISD building or Capital Division 4 for a capital plan. Some of our performance highlights include crime reductions, and I'll speak to those a little later. Our major case impacts, and obviously Bosman is a good example of that. It was a multi-jurisdictional major case that involved obviously a number of services and a number of crime scenes in other jurisdictions. Our increasing service demands, our increased reporting, our enforcement has increased. and we're evidence-based in terms of our deployment. So just looking at crime reduction, and this is the stats can. In our jurisdiction, you can see, the chart tells us that there are 8,800 less victims of crime in our city in 2014 than there was in 2009, and 11,200 less victims per year since 2005. And I just pause on that because we're really talking about real people, real victims. That's what we want to see, is the reductions in people affected by the crimes. It's not just a number, it's about the people. It also tells us that there are 2,000 less victims of violent crime in 2014 than there were in 2009, and 6,800 less property crimes per year in 2014 versus 2009. And again, on the property crime, we know from victimization that a break and enter in somebody's home can be as traumatic as a physical assault because of the invasion of privacy. And many people end up moving or traumatized for a long period of time. In percentages, since 2009, the crime rate is down 29%, crime severity is down 30%, and the violent crime rate is down 29%, and Hamilton's violent crime severity index is down 34%. Let's once again look closer at the red line representing violent crime. So the total crime severity index has fallen 30% since 2009, as seen in the yellow line. And the red line tells us that violent crime severity are obviously headed in the right direction on our reduction of crime. These are the OMBI stats. For 2014, by 147 incidents here, Durham, Halton, Hamilton, London, goes on, Niagara. And as you can see, many of the to how we proceed with investigations. It can be very difficult. With regard to increased service demands, and you can see the last column denotes 2015, which is just a half year. If you're wondering why the numbers drop significantly, it's January 1st through 30th. But when we're dealing with things like child pornography, and you've seen it, I think there was an article in the news yesterday about a London resident. We're talking about terabytes of images, hundreds of thousands, and in some cases millions of images. These require extensive work to sort through, find potential victims, and do intervention in those cases. Our death investigations, suicides, our persons in crisis, and you can see a growing rate there. If you look back in 2007, 1,324, and by last year, well, 2014 for a full year, 2,400. It's a growing concern, and we've taken those steps through our coast, through our MCERT, to have a response that will lead to de-escalation and different resolutions of those issues. In terms of increased reporting, and I talked about this when I met with the Somalian community yesterday, we do have a high reporting rate for hate crimes, and in addition, domestic violence, sexual assault, and sexual offenses. That's intentional because we want people to come forward with those concerns. We want the disclosures so we can do interventions before there's additional victims. So, I mean, you can take two strategies which, holy smokes, it's way out of control, or really what we're trying to do is get people to come forward, report those, and have interventions. So you can see the numbers in the increase. Enforcement through our problem-oriented policing projects, our internal task force, and our joint forces initiatives. And you can see what that has led to. The changing context federally is RCMP is dedicating quite a bit of resources to the high-risk travelers, obviously the terrorism issues. It's the same thing with the OPP, and of course we're involved in that as well. If you recall the threat that happened that was launched by the internet at McMaster University, but it was happening actually across the country. We initiated the investigation through our provincial anti-terrorism squad and had an arrest basically in a day intensity areas for those issues, and you can see the red circles. Changes by 2012. Changes again in 2013. and then violent calls for service in 2014. It's obviously what you want. You want the red areas to diminish and the distribution. Part of our concern when we launched the anti-violence initiatives was, would you get disbursement or dispersal? Would it just be spread out to a different location? And that has not happened. We've actually seen the reductions. Similarly for assault calls, 2009. $13, and $14. And again, keeping in mind these are, real people who were assaulted, diminishing numbers. That's what we're aiming for. Lastly, with regard to robbery incidents, same years. Finally, 2014. So again, headed in the right direction. We see the percentages, but graphically you can see the reductions in those hot zones, we'll call them. So we are evidence-based in terms of our deployment, and through collaboration with the Lynn and St. Joseph's Healthcare, we have implemented the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team, and I do want to acknowledge the contributions of Lynn. They do fund that mental health worker to the tune of around $500,000 per year. And our board, of course, implemented 5 new people last year towards this specific initiative. It's a growing area. There's also room for expansion, in my opinion, in terms of how we're treating these issues. So in terms of our apprehension rate, so when we do attend the call, we are apprehending people less often, and that's a good thing. It means they're not going to hospital, sitting there between 2 officers, stigmatized. We're getting them alternate treatment out in the community. And you can see some of the numbers here. Diverted over 900 people from the hospitals back into the community or back to treatment that they already have. And of course, we use McMaster Children's Hospital for under 18 and or 50. In terms of our law enforcement contacts and increased visibility, we have had a number of traffic stops, our tickets, warnings, witnesses, all of these contacts with members of the public. So our request is 2.79%, and as mentioned, it was unanimously approved by our board. We did look at considerations for the board at that time, both body-worn cameras, and those studies still continue with other agencies. And of course, the expressway enforcement, we have still to bring that forward. We've altered the original position that the board saw, and we'll be bringing a proposal back next month to the board. See the increases for a little over $4 million at 2.79%. Keeping in mind, like many agencies, 90% of the police budget is salaries and benefits. 10% is the operational side that we have direct control over. So our discretionary portion of the budget comes in with a modest increase of 0.31%, and the city set a target rate of 1%. And you can see the net discretionary spending, operating costs, and city cost allocations that we receive from the city, largely around insurance, to an increase of 0.16%. So again, total percentages increase is 2.79. In many other jurisdictions, Halton included, assessment growth is given to the board on a continuing basis at about 1%. If we applied that formula, we'd be coming in at 1.79%. And we recommended and received approval for that budget from our board. And pending any questions, I turn it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Acting Chief Gert. Appreciate it. Excellent presentation and slides. I have a speakers list now. I have Councillor Green, Councillor Partridge, Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through you to Deputy Gert. Eric, I know we sat on the Community Foundation together in 2009, 2010. You brought a similar presentation, particular to the heat maps. I asked the question then at the AGM. I'll ask it now with regards to our community. I know in the last 3 weeks we've had 2 home invasions and a stabbing in a very short period of time. I stopped by a young man's hospital bed last night, had just been shot. With regards to the dispersal or these heat maps, the question I'm getting from my community is there a policy of containment? Because I'm seeing that a natural process would be to go from blue to yellow to red, remedying social challenges in different neighborhoods, but to go from blue to red and then to have that intensification, if you could comment in giving us some context, maybe dispelling myths if they're out there, giving you the opportunity to do that, Eric. Although crime rates are down across the city, in the intensified areas, particularly wards 2, 3, and a little bit of 4, have the numbers gone up? Have criminal activity gone up in those communities?
Well, you do have to do more granular analysis. I'm just curious what you mean by containment, a philosophy of containment. Just
Well,
so I
can
understand
give you
the
a
question.
practical example. There are things that happen on Barton Street that just wouldn't be permissible anywhere else in terms of sex trade work and some of the activities that are happening down there. You just don't see it anecdotally anywhere else across the city. My community thinks there could possibly be a policy of containment where we've decided that's okay in that particular area.
Yeah, we have no such policy of containment, and we don't condone, if you're kind of referring to what's happened in Vancouver, where in some cases the police have said, well, this is a non-enforcement area. We don't operate that way. In terms of why those areas emerge, it's more complicated than just a sex trade worker showing up. It has to do with the distribution of drugs. It has to do with a whole dynamic range of factors. But certainly we don't condone containment. In terms of our deployment to those areas, we're evidence-based, as I say, and this is the community model that's being applied across Ontario, is you go to the high-needs neighborhoods and deploy where that's required. And that's obviously been the purpose of the action strategy. And also for our problem-oriented policing projects, they're evidence-based and we deploy where the issues are. In terms of growth rates, I'd have to look at the specific beats to give you an answer to that specific question, because there's declines in some areas, increases in others. It's a more global representation, as you can see from the mapping and the heat strategy, to look at the total global effect. But to drill down more deeply, we can certainly do that. But that's at a beat level, or in your case, whether it's a larger sector, or because we delineate a little differently than the city does, but we can even go to emergency service zone, which is the paradigm that the city uses. So we can do that work.
Maybe another way to ask the question to figure out kind of where you're gaining success from. When we looked in 2009, the geography of the distributed intensity of crime broadly across the mountain, as well as spread east to west downtown, what do you attribute then to the success of going from red to blue in those outlying areas? And why did we not also experience that success based on evidence-based policing? You would think the higher levels of calls would receive more service, and therefore we would have the same rate of decrease in violent crimes.
Well, it's multifaceted, for one, and if you saw the assets that we were deploying, it's not just straight going out and doing enforcement. It's also bail compliance. It's managing high-risk offenders. It's dealing with the problem-oriented policing that arrive. You're often, through as counselors, a conduit for how we get those complaints. We get them independently as well, but you also get them. So we're strategic deploying at the divisions, at the beat level, but we're also combining that with reductions, even the presence of ride lanes and where we deploy. We don't just deploy part of the year, we deploy all year, and we deploy at all times of the day. If we've got high crime areas, then we can deploy in there as well. Whether you catch impaired drivers or you're present as a police service and very visible, that's another effect. So it's multiple strategies to look for the crime reduction. There's not just one single correlation in terms of intervention and a decrease. So it's managing all those things.
Okay. Then on to the slide 35 and your 2016 budget request. If you could just maybe expand on your discretionary spending. Where are you allocating those discretionary dollars?
Yes, and this is, well, it's multifaceted. You have the list in front of you there, Ted, if you wanted to go over that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. In this slide here showing the discretionary increase of $467,000, it includes a number of different items, including ammunition. We've got new equipment for our tech crime unit. We have Also, an increase in EAP expenditures. So it runs the gamut of different expenditure items.
So what does that look like year to date from the 2015 budget?
Year to date, on the 2015, we're pretty much right in line on those sort of expenditures. So we're not seeing either big savings or deficit in those areas.
And so if you can comment perhaps on the city cost allocations.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
The insurance, that's related to like our risk management charge from the city. It's based on a 4-year rolling average of claims. So over the last number of years, we've seen an increase, and that's why we're having that increase there, $236,000.
19% of the city's budget, $154 million, is the police budget. Are there ever conversations around senior staff in ways that we can perhaps reduce that overall city allocation, or is it always a given that your target is always to be at 19%, or is there ever generative discussions around the board that would try to push that from 19 to say 18 or 17? Because as you'll know throughout this budget process, and starting as back far as the community emergency services, we're having these conversations with boards and agencies, yours being alike, asking people to keep their costs down, and yet there's always, year after year, an increasing cost of policing. So I'm wondering if you ever looked at it through the framework of we're going to go from 19% to 18% and try to reduce the overall cost, or are you constantly pegging your growth to the growth of the city with regards to housing starts? Because, Madam Deputy Mayor, it's troubling that we're talking about this downward trend in crime that and oftentimes we'll see presented to the community in terms of the success of our policing, and yet costs continue to grow. So if you could just comment on that.
Certainly through you, Madam Mayor. We do not take 19% as the target. In fact, that was just an assessment after the fact to look at, because we received questions, well, what percentage of the levy are you actually at? And the assertion at that time was, well, you're going up, you're going up. The percentage wasn't going up, and it varied around the 19% mark. So first answer is no, we don't use that as a benchmark. In terms of our costs, and as you know, our discretionary piece is 10% of that budget, total budget. The vast majority is 90%, which is salaries and benefits. And I leave the board to respond to that. We just went through a bargaining process at the junior level and the senior level, and I'm sure they're equally frustrated. I'll leave that to the chair. In terms of costs across the province, the OAPSB is taking a position on that. So the control that we have is over the 10%. And when we do our budgeting, and I can tell you the process, because both the other deputy and I did it this way, is we looked at the actual funds required over the last 3 to 4 years. Where that wasn't being met, we reduced those costs. We do not look at standing items. We do zero-based budgeting, and are things required? Ammunition is probably a good example. The costs have been driven up because of the worldwide demand for ammunition. We were actually at a point at one time where we couldn't get ammunition because it was going to the conflicts elsewhere in the world, and it just was not available. In terms of city cost allocations, we have no control over that, and you see it's 0.16%. And our operating costs, in my view, are fairly modest, 0.15%. In terms of looking at reductions, and I referred to those earlier in my slides, I pull it up here quickly. Those are rather complicated slides. They take a minute. So we looked at those cost reduction and efficiency measures. It's not just this year. It's been multi-year. So we evaluate the programs, restructure where required. As I said, with a case preparation unit, we realized the savings of 12 people by doing that work, and often with accommodated people. Our attendance management system, which is really software to manage those issues, our process integration, and we continue on that journey with all the technology that's coming out and the expectations, integrating both our niche, which is our records management system, our crime analytics, which allow us to do more comprehensive, and to your point, far more granular analysis of where we need to deploy. Our CAD upgrades, those systems, and I'll give you a quick example. When we went to our mobile workstations inside the vehicles and we had Blue Tree technology in the cruisers, we were actually bleeding edge. In the space of 5 years, it was outdated. We have to change over those systems. That's the nature of the beast. You can probably see that with your own iPhones and iPads as they come and go. And of course, we're looking for Development Charges Committee, shared resource strategies. We do that, for example, on purchasing of police equipment. It's not just the Hamilton Police Service. We work through a purchasing cooperative group to realize reductions through joint approaches with the OPP, with other major services, to get the vendors with lower dollar values for us. And obviously the capital expenditures happen outside our service and through the GIC up to council. So we are constantly focused on those issues. It's both strategic deployment, but it's also looking for those efficiencies constantly. So we're certainly got our eye on the ball, in my view, that way.
So on that note, there's been one issue that I've had in terms of efficiencies, and maybe it could be taken into consideration for members around the board present. If you could just let me know how many police services have legal services for their chief of police?
Many of them, in fact, if our legal counsel was here, he did that survey. Most of the major police services have them. The smaller police services often contract out because they may have 25 or 30 members. But the larger police service, I know Toronto does, Waterloo does, Durham does.
Just for a point of clarity, you're stating that all of those services have a legal department for just their chief or for the board? The distinction being between the board and the chief?
Yes, not a legal department for the service. It is legal counsel to the chief. Often when they require external opinions for the board, they will contract out. There's a number of lawyers who provide that service, and our board has done that as well.
I apologize, because my understanding was that oftentimes police service boards have legal staff that help direct them. I didn't realize that they also have them for the chief of police. It just seemed like a strange expenditure and one that you might be able to find some efficiency on. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Acting Chief, and thank you for your presentation. My questions are around policing out in the rural area, particularly. And Ward 15, as you know, is the only urban area of Flamborough is Waterdown, and then I would say 70% of the rest of the ward is rural. And, you know, I know certainly, I guess my question through you, Madam Chair, with all the growth that is happening in Binbrook, has been happening in Ancaster, Stony Creek up in the northern part, and certainly in Waterdown, which is exploding. I know I'm getting an increase in complaints. How are you looking at, or how is the service looking at addressing the crime, just the crime, and it's, you know, it's break-ins, it's, you know, especially cars being stolen, so it's very worrisome for the residents out there. They move out to these nice quiet areas, and you know, videos get posted on Facebook of people walking down the street. It just happened last night or the night before in Waterdown, you know, a fellow walking down just trying all the doors until he found one that was open, and that was a home security system. And this is happening, and so how are you looking at addressing that massive growth that's happening in our city out in the outlying areas?
Yeah, and there's a couple dynamics. I know the chief has been both to your community and Councillor Johnson's community to address some of those issues. And really, when we look at strategic deployment, because we know there are limited resources across the city, we have to deploy where the higher crime is. And just to patrol aimlessly or just to be present is probably not a great idea. I've posited the idea, I know it's probably not going to fly, much like the fire department, that we go with lights and siren everywhere and you'll know we're there. I don't know how popular that would be. We know when we had the helicopter program, for example, there were huge complaints about the noise from the helicopters, but you knew we were there. So, and having worked out in the Flamborough area and with many rural roads, I understand that, and, you know, having driven some beats on a night shift where I may see 4 cars over the course of driving 500 kilometers, literally, usually cold nights, you've got to look at that strategic deployment. Certainly for the growth in both your areas, we continue, and 3 years ago, you may recall, we deployed additional sector officers, particularly in the Mountain Division, where 5 officers were dedicated, and the East End based on on calls for service. So the board at that time increased 10 members frontline, and they were deployed specifically to the mountain and to Benbrook, largely those areas that fall out of Division 2, so both the east end and the mountain. In terms of building, and we're looking at, you see on the report here, Division 4 capital plan, it's really a push and pull in terms of where that belongs. It could be Benbrook based on growth, it could be Waterdown based on growth, and you're quite right, huge changes. In terms of the approaches, and our project shutdown is one of them, where it's cooperative between a number of agencies led by the OPP. We know when we have pulled out of that, not our choice, they shut down, bad pun, they collapsed that project for a short time. We saw huge increases in stolen autos ending up in locations out of town. We continue to deploy that and have seen those reductions in the stolen autos. And I know one of my members was telling me one time, and he lived in Caledonia, he says he came out, went to put his key in the door, and there's no car. It's a very odd sensation. It's a huge inconvenience. We get that piece. In terms of the thefts from autos, we've been really focusing on that in the last 2 years and seeing reductions because, as you say, people come along, try the doors, people have left them open, they end up.
Excuse me just for a moment. I'm having a hard time hearing with all the chatter on the other side of the room, folks. Would you mind? Sorry to interrupt you, but no, seriously, it really was quite distracting. I know it might feel funny and sound funny, but it really was quite distracting. I'm just asking you. Thank you. Carry on, please. Well, I'm sure it was, and maybe the rest of us would like to hear it, but right now I've asked a question, and I would like to hear the response. Go ahead, please. I'm not done with my questioning, and you're not done with your answer.
I'm not. I was going to talk about the thefts from autos. So we've done a large campaign also, and largely through our community mobilization branch, including auxiliaries, where we will go out to areas where people are trying the cars. And largely, as you know, it's a matter of keeping those items. And if you have a look in some of the malls, it's astounding. People's purses, iPads, computers sitting in open view, wallets I've seen. It's incredible. So we've done that through our volunteers to go out to those areas where we have a higher incident to do that preventative piece in addition to, and we really commend citizens when they call us and say, you know, there's a guy walking down trying the doors. We want to come to that call because often that person that we arrest is responsible for literally hundreds of those entries. Some people view it as a minor inconvenience, might be change in the ashtray, but there's all those other victims, and they can get a fairly decent haul. We're not the communities we were years ago where you can just leave everything open, doors to your home and cars, so we continue to work on those issues.
Yeah, and thank you for that answer, and you raised a very good point. Certainly when we had the community meeting in November, and the chief came and inspectors and officers showed up. There was almost 200 people that attended the meeting in Waterdown. And, you know, I certainly appreciated not only the stats that they rolled out, but also the fact that when they did make an arrest, they had something like 200 break-ins. Right. When they were able to make the arrest, it was 2 people who they were able to trace back, were largely responsible for the majority of those break-ins. So it's not 200 people coming out and each doing a break-in in the community. That's right. Which can be very nerve-wracking for residents when they don't understand the breakdown of the stats. I appreciated the question about the technology that the good councillor from Ward 3 had raised, because that was one of my questions. But the other one is the question around partnerships. You know, certainly when you look at the communities where there's significant growth, the fire department is looking at expanding, building a new building. I'm wondering if the police are looking at perhaps a partnership there. We don't need, you know, necessarily have the stats to warrant a dedicated police station, but even a place for the officers to come in or to have our community representatives on our police community committee. That's the type of thing that I'm wondering if that's being looked at, or could that be looked at, I guess is more the question. Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and through you, Madam Chair, and I look for Dan Bowman. The reason I ask is Stan has been involved with many of these projects, and I'll just give a quick example. We're in discussions with the fire department, not so much for, Flamborough, but we're looking at, is there potential for a consolidated garage at an existing city location? We'll see efficiencies through similar equipment, upfitting, those type of things. That's just one example. But we have looked at even our marine facility, which has been approved by council on the horizon, is looking at EMS integrating with us. In terms of partnerships in the community, yes, we're always interested in that. We often, when we open CPCs, community policing centers, we incur those costs. We have to look at the utility of those. If we receive 5 visitors a week, then you start to look at the cost effectiveness of those. So we have looked at those. Where'd Dan go? So Dan, subject to your comments. Sorry, Dan is our manager of fleet and facilities.
All right, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. We actually attended a meeting hosted by Ray Kessler of Real Estate on Thursday again to, as collectively as a city, to look at all of these initiatives, and the deputy has identified the ones that we have been a partner to. Certainly as we redevelop the marine facility on the waterfront, EMS would want to have that presence there, and we have that commitment. We're also looking at Fire is building a new vehicle repair facility, and we have that need also. So we've had those discussions. Those discussions have actually been ongoing for over 10 years with Fire if they move out of the Ferry and Bay Street location. So it makes great sense to create those partnerships. There are synergies, and we have those open dialogues with the city on an ongoing.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that answer, because I've had that similar discussion with Chief Simons, certainly about the watered down area and the possibility of partnership. And lastly, when we had the meeting in November, right after, the chief and I had chatted about certainly getting together in January, February to talk about the issues in Waterdown. So the chief is no longer there. And rather than raise the issues of the community policing center here at the table, I'd appreciate if I could have a conversation, get together with you folks. So I'll have my office follow up and set up that meeting, but I'd appreciate it very much.
Well, by all means, it will involve the superintendent of the division, which is now Superintendent Calvert as well, and Inspector Huss, who has been there for a number of years.
That would be terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson.
Yep, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate that. And I just want to put this out there that I've probably gone through 14 crime managers in the 5 years that I've been here.
Understood.
Because I have 2 sections of my ward, one being from down the mountain and one for being in Glanbrook. So it's been challenging at best to keep up with all the changes. Having said that, could you please go back to your robbery incidents map,
Sure.
please?
May take a bit with all the graphics.
That's fine. That was it.
It's violent calls. It's just after. That's assaults, and then robberies is last, of course. There we go.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you don't have Bimbrook, Mount Hope, Winona on your map, and it's frustrating for me to see whether or not there's been any changes. So I'd really like to see that map.
Understood.
On February the 6th, we are going to have 2 police community meetings, one being in Winona and one being out in Glanbrook, so that this map can be shown to the community. As you recall, last summer, in Bimbrook alone, we had probably hundreds of cars being broken into, houses being broken into, because they'd break into the car, they'd take the automatic garage door opener, and then when the resident left without knowing this was missing from their car, they'd come back and they'd open up the garage and just walk into the man door and they'd help themselves. So the good news to this at the end of the day was that your team were able to apprehend 4 individuals, all under the age of 17. 2 don't live in the village, 2 did. And I won't say any more about those details, but it was a relief. So when we have a community meeting about these things, the first thing that comes up is community watch. And there still seems to be a drive. And now we're having some issues in Winona. There is that topic coming up again. Policing center, community issues, community watch. So I would also like to have that offline conversation with you as well. I think that the big key for this is education. When people start seeing the perception, one person gets broken into, it gets repeated 100 times, and then it sounds like there's more than one break-in. So I really would appreciate those hard statistics for those areas so that we can go back to the community and past. And also, I really appreciate all the stuff that your team have done, because when you call, you raise some issues, the crime managers are all over it, and they contact the person directly, which is really helpful. One question I have too is the aggressive driver's line. Yep. We've been promoting the snot out of it because we have every street in Ward 11, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone here, who have residents who are concerned about the speeding on their street. 9 times out of 10, they know who it is. They know where that person lives. So we've been really, really pushing hard for people to call the aggressive drivers. I didn't see this in your presentation. So could you just highlight that a little bit and how well that's going and if the follow-up that you do?
Yeah, sure. And just as some opening comments on the beat crime manager first, we introduced that. Actually, it was the neighborhood safety project that introduced it. And part of our goal was that you had a continuous person, keeping in mind you've had changes. It used to work through 5 staff sergeants and sergeants on those squads, which was actually worse because depending on which day you called and who you got. So that was a move. We see it as well as a developmental position for our people because they have to manage issues. You can't necessarily solve them, and you know that as counselors, but you manage the issues. So it's a tremendous growth opportunity for our officers who are looking to succeed. It's all part of our mentoring and developing strategy. So we understand the tension between continuity, which quite frankly, I would like to leave beat crime manager in place for 12 years because then they know all the people, the contacts and all that, but it's that tension. In terms of the map, I do know that you raised this and the chief did extend that out. I think, and I didn't prepare this, the chief did, I think because he started in 2009, he wanted to have the frame of reference similar, but we do have those maps that include that larger portion. And I agree with you, if people from Monona are thinking, well, I don't rate for the map, they do, and it's important to get that information out. And so that's important. On the aggressive driving hotline, we've had it for probably about 10 years now. We also have school bus watch for a similar program, where if people witness that, they can call into either line, and we will follow up with both a phone call and a letter. In terms of prosecutions, they're very difficult, as you know, because identity of the driver is key. You get into disputes in court. People just want to call. They don't necessarily want to go to court. But the larger issue, and you raised it, traffic is still our leading complaint at any public session we go to. And it's largely as you say. And having been in traffic, and when I got complaints, and sometimes I would get the person who called it in and issued them a ticket. And they said, well, you give me a ticket because you committed the offense and it's a complaint. That's why I'm here. So, I mean, there's a certain irony in that. Not a good one because we don't want to be catching people doing that. So it really is, and you know it in the rural areas, there are huge geographic areas to cover to deploy consistently and get those, and then we have competing resources, obviously. If there's high fatality areas, we tend to deploy in high accident locations as well, because obviously personal injury is foremost. But obviously speed is a huge contributing factor. So we do continue to do the aggressive hotline, and the public can call in, give us the details. Obviously, if we can get a license plate, that's step 1. 2 is a physical description of the driver, because it may not be the registered owner who's driving. And then we will do the follow-up and continue to do that. We actually present to the board on our year-end report on those statistics, and our commanders get them on a monthly basis as well.
And thank you so much for that. And again, I'd really like to get together with you about the community watch and the policing centers. We've got lists of volunteers who are willing to sit there and do whatever it takes just to give the communities a peace of mind that it's, and I know when I first started in this position that the Bimber Community Center was actually pulled because of lack of volunteers. Well, since the activity has increased, the volunteers list have. So I'd really like to sit down and talk to you about that as well.
And just a quick comment on that for the volunteers. Really happy to hear that. The community mobilization branch, where we're seeing some of those increases in staffing, it is that huge return on investment that we're seeing. We have almost 100 auxiliaries now. We've almost doubled them in the last 5 years. But victim services volunteers, CPC volunteers, we're also looking at it strategically to get people through the process and potentially for recruiting. And diversity is a huge aspect of that too. So when we hear that we have more volunteers, that's tremendous. We can funnel those volunteers into our existing system, regardless if we end up implementing the CPC or not. So I'm really pleased to hear that.
Well, that'd be awesome. And the going joke in Bimbrook, given all the activity that's going on, you can't swing a cat without hitting an off-duty police officer because you all like to settle up there. So
it's because they're safe communities.
Yes, so that's the ironic part. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Good to see you again, Acting Chief Gerd and Deputy Weatherall and the entire team. Thanks for the presentation. First and foremost, thank you for the very prudent fiscal request you're coming in at this year. I'll just say a preamble, Eric, that I think our police service is second to none, and I've always felt our city and our community overall is one of the safest in the country. And it's a joy to live in our city, and I think more and more people are discovering Hamilton for a variety of reasons, and you're an important component of that. So I state that right up front. Now I want to get into some questions and comments I have. If you bear with me, Madam Deputy Mayor, I have quite a few. It's been about 10 years since I've been on the police board. Could you flip back, please, Ted, to slide 6, please? And I'll work through, or Eric, and I'll work through chronologically, please, from my questions and comments. And as you're doing that, that's the heading that says Policing Context and Police Services Act Mandate. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Eric, where does quality of life issues that I've always been a big promoter of, where does that fall into this mandate? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, and through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I believe it's threaded through many of these things, and it's been a huge change, really through community-based policing when it emerged, but specifically to our service. When we looked at, it was called COP 2000, so that was 1998 when it was initiated, but then Neighborhood Safety Project. In fact, we did a survey on community well-being at that time, an extensive survey through both McMaster and York University, went through the Ethics Committee, administered, to look at not only, we have the statistics here, but how do people feel about the quality of life? So it was a focus and intentional. Beat crime managers are one of those examples, and I touched on it briefly. They largely deal with quality of life issues. Now, it touches on criminality, but not always. And for us as an efficiency, and you will know it as councillors, you may have somebody with a persistent, let's say it's a neighbor dispute. It's been going on for 5 years. They don't reach the threshold of criminality, but it consumes huge resources for you. Our intent, and we went from 12 people handling the issue to 1, is they can phone up, or Mrs. Brown phones up with the issue, and the beat crime manager says, no, I'm aware of that, is there anything new? Because often the people just want to retell the story yet again. And when we were sending out officers to these calls, huge time spent listening to the story yet again. And then the dynamic is they try, the officer, their best to come up with a solution to a difficult problem. And then it says, well, that's not what the other officer told me. Well, that's right, because A, it's a difficult question, and we're just trying to come up with creative solutions. So that was one focus. But whether we're looking at victims issues, and we've obviously expanded on that, both with our specialized victims homicide branch that looks at specifically dealing with victims of homicide and the long-term support there. Our own victim services branch, and I commend our board yet again, we funded in-house because we thought it was that important. It didn't want it to be contingent on provincial funding that may come or go, because you can't kind of say one day, we're here for you victims, oh I'm sorry, it closed last week and we're not here. And that obviously has an impact back to frontline policing. We have volunteers who come and do that work. And having listened to Lori Triano Antidormini speak about the murder of Zachary and the impact on her, the fact that she had somebody there just to listen to her, to help her through the process. Now, she's both a victim, but it's also a quality of life issue, because her description of the experience was everybody's kind of doing their job, which is what they're supposed to do, and she understood that. But she had needs that were separate from that because she's never been through this before. So she had to have somebody help her through that. So we integrated in the victim services. We integrated in our crime prevention. It's very difficult to sell crime prevention. We'd rather not have the crime at all. Right. But obviously that can be through contact with people, working with them, and being proactive. Law enforcement, again, by our presence, if we deter crime, Our goal is not always to arrest, it's to deter that. And then you see some of the other public order maintenance, even there. Because we uphold the Constitution, allow people to protest peacefully in our areas, provided they are not disruptive or causing riots. They're free to express their views and do so in a public format. In my view, this all talks about quality of life in the city of Hamilton.
So, Acting Chief, thank you for that explanation, a thorough explanation. Again, for the majority of my constituents, fortunately, the quality of life, the playground vandalism, the traffic issues and enforcement, possible car thefts, vandalism, break-and-enters, those are the kind of quality of life that probably, hopefully, very few of them experience in their lives with their families or their neighborhoods and their parks and the facilities the city owns, graffiti, defacing public property, things like that. But I just wanted to make sure quality of life, those type of issues, isn't forgotten in all the policing you do, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you to Eric, and I'm hearing it isn't.
It is a focus, and I'll say it's also a cost to policing because there's an expectation from the public, even if it doesn't reach the threshold of criminality. People pay their taxes, you've come, they want you to do something about the issue and be creative. As I touched on additionally with mental health issues and addictions issues, these have huge impact for us in the cities, and how we respond to that is very important. Part of our quality in there is not taking people to the hospital if we don't need to, not facing the stigma, taking the resources or plans of care that happen outside that. We don't want to criminalize the mentally ill. So this is it's a major thrust, and it's tied into quality of life.
Acting Chief, what's the total complement of uniform versus civilian currently? Is it about 1,100 with our service?
Correct, and we're a little over 865 for our sworn complement.
The action teams, the heat teams, the bear teams, are they available everywhere? Because in my humble opinion, under the former leadership, there seemed to be a real targeted focus in a particular area of the city with action, heat, and bear. But I just need to reassure my constituents and across our mountain community where Division 3 operates out of, that these teams are available as well when needed. Madam Deputy Mayor, through to the Acting Chief.
Thank you. And I know you met most recently this week in regard to the Community Policing Center on Concession Street. And part of the strategy there was, and I know you know it from your meeting with Inspector Worster and Inspector Huss, we looked at the deployment of action up there. We looked at the deployment of the mounted patrol unit. We looked at the visibility and the presence, and really what were the objectives of the community? Was it that they wanted somebody sitting in a station, or did they want higher visibility and presence? In response to your earlier comment, when action was first deployed, and you can see it from the maps, it really was targeted those high crime areas. It's evolved through the course of time. It's 6 years later now. They have grown and expanded, and again in efficiencies, when we have had, and it's not a good thing, we had 2 murders over the weekend. When we have to do canvasses, we have to do perimeter control, when we have to look at those type of issues, that team comes in, they're experienced in how to do canvasses. We found physical evidence, we found videos, we found witnesses to the event by deploying very quickly after the event through the action, trained officers who do that. They also literally handle hundreds of protests in a year. So what that means is the front line can stay deployed to doing frontline issues. That group of people will look after that in addition to their core responsibilities. But to your point, we do track, and we have that information available, of their deployment in all 3 divisions, Action and PU. And I know that Inspector Worster takes a great strides to make sure that that is done and that we react and respond to the particular demands. I'll give you another quick example. We've had a number of sexual assaults along the Bruce Trail in a number of the divisions. Action, again, is deployed in a very visible way, whether on bikes, again, horses if they're ATVs, to be present in those areas so that the people who are out jogging on the trails can see them, but it also leads again to gaining information about potential suspects, and we're able to deploy. We've deployed in the Quigley Road area, we deployed in the West Mountain relative to those kind of sexual offenses, and that causes huge concern in the community.
Okay, Acting Chief, thank you. So I'm hearing Action, Heat, Bear are available and can be deployed in all parts of the city. I'm pleased to hear that. The link in the Red Hill, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed the perception was until, on behalf of our community, a number of us raised the specter of some serious, consistent long-time dangerous driving occurring, all kinds, along the Lincoln Red Hill, until we raised it to a high level of publicity and community awareness. It seemed then Hamilton Police Service said, oh man, we better get a pilot out there, we better put more reinforcement, more officers. So I have seen more deployment. So I'm just trying to understand what was, and maybe if policing always was on the Lincoln Red Hill, or if you have raised the level and the amount of it, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you. Tarek.
And thank you for the question. I'll turn it over to Deputy Weatherall. He's led this effort, and also he's leading the project in terms of what will be coming to the board next month.
Terrific. Please, Deputy Weatherall.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. This has been an ongoing project for the Hamilton Police Service since the Lincoln-Alexander Expressway and the Red Hill Valley have been constructed and vehicles started to travel on them. The difficulty with those two stretches of highway, and in totality, it's 17 kilometers of roadway. The policing responsibility has fallen to the two divisions. Division 2 for the stretch of the roadway that follows through, and Division 3, the officers that, predominantly the divisional safety officers, who focus on enforcement strategies along all the roadways within the divisions that they're responsible for policing. Council, you will know that the city received a report from a consulting company that provided some information and data within that. Upon being made aware of that, we took that information and we tried to substantiate some of the issues in there to see if we could do something to reduce the motor vehicle collisions, the personal injury accidents, the property damage accidents, and improve the quality of life for the people that choose to travel on those such roadways. Those folks that are traveling within the city and those folks that are using it as an expressway to travel through the city to get to their future destination. In order to validate some of that information, we initiated a POP project, a problem-oriented policing project, which all the councillors are very familiar with, having dealt with the crime beat managers and the individual officers on a regular basis. This has been the prime focus for the last about 60 days now, because it's a moving day by day. And through that period of time, there has been increased enforcement along the both the Lincoln-Alexander Parkway and the Red Hill Valley Expressway. And we will be coming back to the board with recommendations on how we can target the activities along both those roadways so that we can improve the safety for all persons choosing to travel on those roadways.
Thanks, Deputy Weatherall. I'm encouraged to hear that, and I'm glad the police service has recognized the need for greater enforcement along there. Madam Deputy Mayor, thanks for your indulgence. I still have a few more questions. This is just a comment, Eric, and you've heard me say this before. One thing that drives me nuts about the organization is the lack of continuity. I mean, I have in the last 6 months gone through crime manager Myra James, who was seconded to college. I've gone through a Krista McKinney, who I thought, wonderful, I finally got somebody established, and now I've got Elisa Chambers, all fine people. I know there's advancement within the organization, but what drives my community nuts in my own office is just this lack of continuity. Now I've got Superintendent Dave Calvert, thrilled, okay, great, I got a new guy up in Division 3. Fortunately, I've had Inspector Huss there for a few years. So maybe just a comment as to why this happens often, and is there some way to address this? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
And thank you, and through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I agree. I spoke about the tension earlier. I'll call it the juniority of our organization as opposed to the seniority of our organization. Because of that juniority, we really are seeing significant changes in the demographics of the police service. We're seeing that huge changeover. So part of our demand is to mentor and develop people within the service. As I mentioned earlier, this is a huge developmental spot, the beat crime manager. So you've got the tensions of continuity. As I say, I would love to have, because I was a divisional superintendent, consistent beat crime managers for 8-9 year assignment. I'd be happy to do that. For the development of our people, it's not necessarily the best. And establishing those relationships, in my view, is not necessarily a bad thing, because now you've got all those people that you've dealt with. I'm not belittling what you've said. In terms of contacts within the organization, you know how they work, you know how they do business, and they will become the leaders of the future, who either yourself or your people who succeed you in the council positions will have had that experience. Part of our demands is the complexity of policing, and, is it investigative? Are they quality of life issues? You could have somebody who goes through so many different careers within the career. which quite frankly is a positive in terms of recruiting people, because we know the demographic for new people, they'll move jobs every 4 to 5 years. And not to be, crass, but they can do that within our organization. They can be a sexual assault investigator, then go into heat or drugs and vice, move on to victims of crime unit, go into homicide eventually. So it's part of the larger dynamic of developing and mentoring our people. To me, this is a hugely pivotal role. I think many people find it very demanding, the beat crime manager, because, like I say, you can't always solve the problem. You have to manage the problem. But you do that through cooperative efforts. So this is the tension. I'd love to dedicate them for 12 years. I don't know if we ever can quite get there.
Maybe, Eric, to make sure that the files are consistently handed across as well, so the new crime manager, the new beat officer isn't starting from scratch. Okay, quickly, slide 7, the next one, please. Eric, so that top part there, courts are not required to weigh in on the cost benefits of the major decisions and the impacts on your policing priorities. Sounds like you're saying, you know what, you're pleading for help either on the financial side or maybe on some of the court decision side. Is there some lobbying effort by the Chief of Police in Ontario to hopefully get some support on this, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you?
Yeah, generally speaking, these either come out of Supreme Court decisions or coroner's recommendations and best practice, and we've seen good examples, all the coroner's recommendations dealing with persons in crisis. And there have been so many of them. It's combined in Toronto. They did 3 at once. We've seen our own. There have been more global applications of this, but often when we refer to the Supreme Court, Ascoff is particularly in Stinchcombe, where decisions, back in the 90s, it used to be for disclosure. We just had to provide disclosure that the police believed relevant. But with those decisions, they said, no. You have to disclose everything you've got. And let's say in a homicide investigation that's complex, you may have 4 or 5 persons of interest, risen level of suspects. You have to disclose all that information. So we've gone to, from a file that might be literally in the 70s this big, to literally boxes and now disks and terabytes of information. The Bosma trial, I think you'll see, relative to that disclosure, is huge, both the technology piece, but because it was cross-jurisdictional with many scenes, a number of people involved, that's part of it. I don't know that you can lobby necessarily for that. We have to follow both the Constitution and the Supreme Court when it makes the decision. So I guess that's why it's worded that way. They don't say, well, sorry, it's going to cost you, 30 extra people to do this work. I'll give you another quick example. With NG 911, that's next generation 911 communications, the public will eventually be able to send us texts, to send us videos, all through to our communications branch. That now becomes evidence that we have to manage. And you can only imagine on a large event, if you get hundreds of those images, and with the disclosure implications, we have to disclose all that and also have to manage the information. So these are the type of things that happen, and under the requirements of both Stinchcombe and Ascoff, you got to give it. So that's just the way it is.
Thanks for that explanation. Slide 10, Acting Chief. So looking at that, I guess the police wanted to put that up there to show the good news over all of our city, and the fact that maybe you can explain why this slide is, I'm thrilled. That's wonderful. I would expect my economic development department would put that up, but there's a reason why I'm sure the acting chief wanted to throw that up there, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Yes, and it was the chief that put it in, but it's been a strategy he's had for a number of years. The idea is that we're not disconnected from this growth, from the goals of the city, to see our labor market increase, to see our buildings in our city happen, to see success. Obviously, with the action strategy and quality of life and feelings of safety in the downtown core, this was a major thrust. So if we have people, potential investors, come into the downtown core and they feel safe when they're here, they like the shops they go to, they're not seeing the signs of decay in the urban core, then they invest. So we all profit by that, and as a Hamiltonian, it's a good news story. I think the main thrust is we're not disconnected from the other major goals of the city.
So, Eric, just finishing up, so segueing on that, and forgive me now for asking this, so segueing from that, which I appreciate, flipping quickly to slides 27, 28, and 29, Acting Chief.
This could take a bit, but yep.
Keeping in mind the wonderful economic news you said, excuse me, the the positives you said of investments in our downtown, our major downtown of the city of Hamilton, Lower City. So I'm going to just leave this thought.
Are you looking, I'm sorry, are you looking at these slides? Because they're actually.
3 slides,
Okay, yep.
27, 28, 29.
Yep.
Violent calls, robbery, assault. I leave it with my 3 colleagues, my elected colleagues on the board and with the acting chief. There's got to be a different and better way of showing these 3 slides, because what the acting chief just said from slide 10 and the economic positive news slide and referencing all the good investment downtown, and sorry, there's just something that bothers me about these 3 slides, not to take away from factual data, statistical evidence, but I'll leave it with my 3 colleagues, Chairman Ferguson, the mayor, and Councillor Whitehead. There's got to be a different and better way of showing this. Thank you very much, Acting Chief. Appreciate it. Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to just read off who I have on the speakers list. Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Marula, Councillor Conley, Councillor Vanderbeek, Councillor Collins, and then second time Councillor Green. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I get you to go to slide 18?
18?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, according to what I have, it's 18.
That one?
Yeah, the crime severity index.
Yep.
Because it's great to put a stat up, but people don't understand how it's the mechanics, the method, and how it's determined. It doesn't mean a heck of a lot. So can you explain to our viewers, and certainly my councillor colleagues that may not understand it, how do they do this?
Yeah, when unified crime reporting statistics were developed, largely in the States in the 1940s, it was really just a straight count of criminal offenses. And they have a number of rules I won't get into. But one of the considerations is they count the most serious offense when they count them. So if I have somebody who breaks and enters, kidnaps a person, extorts them, does a whole range of things, they could have 8, 9, 10 offenses. They'll just report the most serious. And I'm not sure the actual time span, but within the last 10 years, they went to a weighted value for unified crime reporting statistics. So we do it the same way across Canada, and actually the States is very similar. But then they weighted value based on the crime. Have you got a theft from a vehicle, or have you got a physical assault where somebody sustained injury? So they then weighted the values and said, well, the physical assault or the robbery is weighted higher in terms of crime severity, and that's how they determine the crime severity index. So they're weighted values attributed to the more serious crimes, and then you have obviously this is crime reduction on all the categories. So they talk about violent crime, and they have a number of categories that fit in there, and non-violent crime.
So it's my understanding that what actually translates in the courts in regards to some of this metrics is included in this number. Can you help me?
Not so much the findings in court, because you know how trial goes and what the outcome is. It's the reported crime at the outset. So they don't do it once it is disposed of in court. They count that statistic based on the reporting at the time of the event.
Okay, so help me understand then. So the amount of charges produced by our great frontline officers, do we have a graphic that reflects how many of those charges resulted in convictions?
Yeah, and you've had that question for me a number of times, Councillor. Those statistics are not available from the courts. In terms of the dispositions, the Ministry of the Attorney General collects those, and I believe you had a portfolio related to that previously. You would be aware of that piece. It's not directly connected, and we don't do the dispositions based on that. And as I said, it depends on the outcome of the court. Oftentimes we can have the offense committed, but the victim may not want to proceed with charges for their own reasons, sexual assaults in particular, child abuse calls. So I know as a measure, it's looked at as here's a way to see how efficient or effective this is in terms of the prosecution and the outcome. But there's many other factors that weigh into it, and the Ministry of the Attorney General does not collect those, and we don't relate them back to.
Well, I think the reason I'm asking it, because how do we measure whether the quality of investigation and evidence that appears before the courts meets those standards. And I'm going to talk about a case in Ward 8 where I talked to both the Crown and the defense lawyer, and it was clearly an evidence-based type issue. So forensics and things that weren't done that allowed a long-time break-and-enter individual get off on a charge. So from a quality point of view, how do we ensure, if we are making mistakes, that we prove on those mistakes if we don't measure it?
Yeah, and I can tell you from the Ministry of the Attorney General, in our jurisdiction in particular, and having talked to Tim Power directly, our rate of guilty pleas is very high. Now, you can attribute all kinds of reasons to that, but often it's the integrity of the investigation in the hands of the defense counsel making a determination to go to trial or not. They make that determination, and we have a very high guilty plea rate in this jurisdiction. So if you look at a measure of success, and I realize you have a specific case, but I tend to look at it more globally in terms of that. In terms of feedback, where there are gaps, we do get feedback from the Crown, and when there are gaps in process or training issues, we follow up on those, and we often will get those from the Crown and act on them.
So I guess my point is, do you not think it's important, through the chair, to have some level of measuring those situations where there's inadequate investigation, and actually in some cases the judge has made those determinations, and in fact been very vocal about it. So I'm not sure how that feedback translates into improved training, because I never see the data on that.
Yeah, we don't collect that on that. That would be, and it's a subject to opinion as well, whether it's the defense, the Crown, or the judge, and what they view as the deficiency. There may be other reasons behind that. I'm not making excuses, but we may have evidence excluded on the basis of case law that we can't introduce that's cited in the courts, and things pivot on that. If you look at Badgerow, that's a very good example for evidence that did go in at one point, didn't go in another, on 4 trials for a homicide. So the terrain changes constantly. I can tell you through professional standards and PDD, who oversee changes when we have deficiencies in court processes or our officers make mistakes, that we follow up on that and investigate. If there's any insinuation about misconduct, we also follow up on that.
Well, and again, the reason I raise it, and that's why I want to know how, not only quantify it, but how we respond to it, is the case in Ward 8 was an individual who had a long record of break-in and enters. So it's not, it was historic with this particular individual. There's a break-in a house, the homeowners come home, glass is broken, stuff is stolen. This guy is spotted by the homeowners running across their lawn, and it goes to court. And basically, the claim by this individual running across the lawn, who has a long record, is that he found the bag. The reason why he got off is because no fingerprinting, and here's the one that both the Crown and the defense said was clearly a mistake by the police. There was broken glass. It's not hard to find out if there's glass fragments within the context of that individual that ran across the grass. They didn't do that. This individual got off, he's still out there, and he'll probably still continue breaking in. And so it doesn't raise my comfort level knowing the simple thing like determining whether he had any glass on him from the break-in may have been the difference between him being convicted and not convicted. So I'm not picking on that particular issue, but it bears a bigger concern for me, and that is if the quality of the investigation is resulting in people getting off, how do we address that?
Yeah, and I believe I responded to that question. Certainly to take a specific case without the transcripts or understanding, and not that I don't believe your rendering of it, but for a complete examination, you have to look at the totality of the evidence. To do so in a public forum where I have partial information, I think is irresponsible. If that is the case, and if you have a specific issue with it, I'd be more than happy to look at the case, look at the transcripts and what happened, and review the case, because that's what we do. To draw a general conclusion from a specific one incident, I don't know if that's fair in terms of disposition. But if there are gaps, and as I've said, we will follow up on that. The Crowns will follow up on it. And you have a range of opinions as to why that happened. If the Crown believes it's deficient, we get memos like that, and we follow up on that. And if there are larger training issues, then we follow up on that.
And I want to make it clear, I don't think it's a testimony of the quality of the work our police service does, but my issue is how do we measure that so that we keep that in check? So that's the concern. It may not be an issue, but if we don't have a mechanism, a transparent mechanism to understand it and implement and respond to it, then that's the piece that I'm focusing on. And I appreciate your comments. How many POP projects have we done in the last 4 years?
And I believe I've brought that with me. Actually, I'll turn to Mike. Mike Worcester just sent me that for the 2015. And do you have the total number, Mike, off the top of your head? I just printed it off.
78 last year.
Thank you.
Roughly 70.
Thank you.
I don't have the data.
So the POP project on the Red Hill Expressway was the first POP project in 4 years, 5 years? When's the last time we did a POP project on Red Hill and Lincoln Alexander?
Yeah, and I believe the deputy answered that question. This was a response to what was generated, and it was a three-prong approach: engineering, education, and enforcement. Our view was to look at and do a pilot for that 60-day period to get the information so that we knew, independent of that engineering report, what we had experienced. Unless you have other comments, Deputy, on that?
There have been a few, and I say a few, that's probably about a handful of small POP projects that have been delivered on portions of the Red Hill Valley or portions of the Lincoln Alexander Expressway, but not a coordinated effort by the service to address an identified issue on those roadways. So this is the first coordinated effort involving three different divisions working in support of an identified issue.
I appreciate that. And I want to highlight that not only the councillors, but certainly many of the residents that travel that route on a daily basis not only noticed the difference, but was very pleased with this particular POP project. And I'm a big supporter of the POP projects. I like the idea that you got a trend taking place, you go in and put action in for a period of time to educate, re-educate in some cases, many individuals that may not be abiding by the law. So I appreciate with great support. On slide 30.
I can try it with the mouse here, maybe it's quicker.
Okay, then you have 900 slide?
Diverted over 900.
Divided over 900.
Right.
When you say divided over 900, is that, so it's 900 individuals, so there's no repeat in that 900 number?
I can't answer that. There may be. We do have repeat customers.
Do we have any idea what the number of individuals that have been diverted versus the number of incidents that were diverted?
Yeah. I'm just turning to Mike because Mike is tracking that. We implemented MCERT as a full-time project, as you know, in April. That's when it was full-time after approval by the board for the 5 bodies. So really our fiscal year, we haven't actually had a full year yet running with a full team. We did it as a pilot with central officers. It really only became full-time in April of 2015. So we don't have a full year study. I believe that Mike will be able to get those statistics. He's nodding. Down the road. We haven't done that work yet.
Okay, appreciate the police services. So when we look at Division 3, how many officers in Division 3?
We normally don't give out those numbers, like specific beat distributions and all the rest. We'll say roughly a third of the frontline service, which it is.
Well, we know that the minimum is 18 on the mountains during certain times during the day. Is that correct?
I don't speak about minimums either, Councillor.
Okay.
Operational.
Well, the reason I'm doing this, I'm trying to understand, because there was comments made earlier about distribution of officers within particular divisions. And if you don't know the numbers, then it's pretty difficult to have that discussion. So help me facilitate that discussion.
I think the point of my comments was around distributing an additional sector officer was based on workload in the two divisions, which is why we deployed, I'll call it scant resources as we increase those numbers to frontline responses. That was the point. But to get an operational deployment, I'm not going to do that.
Fair enough. So, but is it fair to say that that there's how to word this? There's the largest population is in Division 3. Would that be correct?
I don't have those population statistics in front of me.
Okay. Do we police by population?
We police by calls for service generated. There's many factors that we balance. One is geography. One is the calls for service. And I mean, if you look at either Flamborough or Binbrook area, there's huge geographic areas. When we did our deployment model restructuring, we had to balance in a number of considerations. If we were to just deploy on base of call for service, in certain areas of the city, you would have officers, stumbling over each other. I guess that would be good if we're a New York model where we're going to deploy in every corner. But with the fiscal constraints that we have and our cop to pop ratio at 153, provincial average is 197, we have to deploy the resources strategically.
Yeah, I'm actually not being critical. I just want to highlight an issue for educational purposes that you deploy your officers based on where the need is, based on crime and I guess it's all the evidence that you have in place, and you should distribute those officers accordingly. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, but not just crime, because there's also, and we hear it obviously from the rural areas, well, they pay taxes, they want presence, they have speeding issues in their areas. So it's really a balance. It's not just one or two items. It's geography, it's crime rates, it's calls for service, it's population. There's a whole range of things that we consider when we look at deployment in those areas.
Okay, so on a given night in Ward 8, for example, and 58,000 people, I mean, I came from a community that had 12,000, had 8 officers. I go into Ward 8, do I have 8 officers covering 58,000 people?
Again, you're asking the question a different way, but it's still operational deployment, so I'm not going to talk about those.
Yeah, good try. I'm going to a point. So there's 100. We base the deployment when we look at data and how well and efficient the city of Hamilton is, because there's a number of communities based on 100,000 population, right?
We don't deploy on that basis.
Officers per 100,000.
We don't deploy on that basis. That just is the number.
No, but that's a number that you often use to suggest that we need more officers in Hamilton. Is that correct?
There's a number of dynamics in that. I'll look at our next door neighbor, Halton. Their crime rates are very different from ours. Their geography is somewhat similar in some areas. There's a whole range of dynamics that enter into deployment. To just do straight cop to pop ratio it's just one indicator. It's not the only indicator that we looked for how to do deployment.
I appreciate that. That's as clear as I hoped to have it. So I appreciate that comment. The action team. Help me understand, is the action team an investigative unit, or is it a deterrent unit and a unit to provide additional services like surveys and search and rescue and having presence?
Yes.
So it's not an investigative unit?
No, it's all those things. They can be investigative. If they're assisting with canvasses, they would gather evidence, they would speak to people. They do enforcement. There's evidentiary requirements there. They're not, if you're looking at kind of the split between frontline and investigative alike, say a sexual assault unit, they're not getting those investigations following up as a general rule.
There's how many officers in the action team?
32 at the moment. Well, it depends, right? Yeah.
How many?
32.
32. Do you have, I didn't see a display, but I think you made reference to it. So do you have the geographic representation of where the action team has spent their time in the last year?
We don't have, I have slides like that, but it's not what I presented today.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking that again is that if you went back to those slides that Councillor Jackson referred to, the red blob, it's not, and I can say this pretty clearly, that it's not that Ward 8 or Ward 7 had a lot of additional officers and attention, yet there has been reduction in crime in those areas. Yet in the downtown, predominantly, the action team spends a lot of time there. I don't think there's any disagreement with it. There's still a big red blob there.
Yes, and I think our point there is, and we saw it in the Ombi statistics, our crime rates relative to our other communities are, approaching the median, which we're happy about, but they're still higher. It's not something to brag about. We would like to see, to the other Councillor Green's point earlier, I'd love to see blue or nothing on those sheets. Is that realistic? I don't think so. So really the intent was to reduce the amount of red. I think we would all agree that's a good thing. Can you get to zero? Probably not. And our community has its challenges, both in terms of many things that we have no control over, whether it's people moving here because it's a large urban area. You know the dynamics from the committees you sit on. I know that.
Yeah, and I think the reason I'm asking or highlighting is because when those red areas started disappearing on some areas of the mountain through that transition of those mapping, it's not a result of additional officers being added to those areas. It's just good policing. Yet we've added a lot of officers in the context of the action team spending a predominant amount of time in a particular area to address the very issues, yet we're not getting the results that we're seeing in other areas of the city.
Well, I'd say if the theory is it's just action that's responsible for those reductions. I don't think I ever said that. It's a concerted effort, but action supplements through strategic deployment to help the front line do the job that they're already doing. So it's a concerted effort. But again, it can also be the investigative end that is assisting with reductions in those crimes. And I'll just use the quick example of the entries to cars. As you get these people and identify them through your various intelligence means, that takes them out of play and you see reductions. So whether they were arrested by the bail compliance unit because they weren't abiding by their terms, whether they're arrested by an action officer who goes to a high crime area for sexual assaults and gets the offender, or whether through investigative means we identify a person and arrest them. They're all contributing factors to the reductions in crimes. And I mean, that's our primary focus is public safety.
Appreciate it. And I'd like to echo Councillor Jackson and Councillor Brenda Johnson comments on continuity. And you talked 12 years. Give me 2 years with a crime manager. So I mean, it's a little bit, it's a little bit misleading that it's, it'd be nice to have 12 years. I don't think anyone around here is asking for 12 years with a crime manager. We're not even getting, what you would think would be a level of continuity is 2 years. In fact, we've had so many crime managers that I think we've covered the alphabet, and superintendents as well. So we've had, on Division 3, we have not had continuity. And continuity is about creating trust, relationships, and et cetera, not only with the, obviously the ward councillors, but certainly with the community, because you can sense a trust, and it takes time to develop a trust. So I would echo the concern on the continuity piece, that I understand that you want people to promote and go through processes. But in Division 3, it's been, probably 8 years now that we've had a fairly high turnover of crime managers and superintendents, probably more than any other division. So I just wanted to leave that with you because it is a concern, and I think you've heard it from a couple of other councillors as well. I wrote notes. I wrote notes. I want to say in conclusion that I obviously supported the budget. I think it's one of the better budgets that we received. I think it's very prudent and efficient. But I also want to highlight the fact that our frontline officers are probably doing a greater amount of work in a more efficient way than most of our competitors right across this country. And that's a testimony to their commitment and dedication and professionalism in this community. The reason why you can deliver these budgets, a budget like you did this year, is because you have great people within your service that are delivering, probably punching way above their body weight. And that's a testimony, and I want to highlight that. So I want to thank the service, and I want to thank all the frontline workers and all those people in between that has made this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should put Councillor Whitehead on the police board. He has so many good questions. Oh, he's actually on there. That's right. through you, Madam Chair. Here you go. Just on a number of items. One in particular, the mapping itself that Councillor Jackson referred to as somewhat problematic, only from a perceptual standpoint. You know what it would be very interesting to find out is not so much where the calls for service and the incident occurred, but where the perpetrator actually resides. Because if you look at those areas in question, Hess Village is an example. Significant amount of calls, but they don't necessarily live in that neighborhood. Hence, it gives a reflection of the crime rate is higher, but it's as a result of activity and mixed-use development that might be contributing to it. So I'd hate to see this map published in any way in the media, because it really doesn't give a reflection of the neighborhood itself per se, but of some of the activity going on in the neighborhood as a result of the mixed-use development planning. So through you, Madam Chair, if you can elaborate on maybe means of trying to improve upon that, it would be greatly appreciated.
And I really appreciate the comments, because we really are on we're in the embryonic stages of our crime analytics unit. This was done through some older technology, but I know Deputy Weatherall's leading that project as well in terms of developing. And we've worked on it for a number of years, both to get the people who have the skill sets to manipulate, not in a bad way,
I get it.
Extract this data, but manipulate it, and you've given an excellent example. We could map out where the residents are. We could map out where the associates are. There's untold possibilities when you start doing interrelationships. And I know, for example, IBM, we had a presentation a number of years ago at the Chiefs of Police Conference. They have taken a corporate strategy to look at acquiring software specifically on analytics, not just for policing, but for businesses, because their point was there's huge volumes of data that many businesses, including us, have, but it's mining that data and then doing it in a thoughtful way, which you've mentioned, and a strategic way, and then you deploy based on that. This really is at the embryonic stages in terms of this mapping, even though it's kind of cool because it's got colors and all that stuff, but really we can start farming that data. So the board has taken that on both as a project for staffing and over the last couple of years, and also for acquiring the software. And of course, we want to integrate again in an efficient way that will use our existing records management system instead of doing a bolt-on that just gives you maybe 10%. The idea was, and we were strategic in this, to work with somebody in the field who can say, how are you going to integrate that? Then what can you do with the data? I've seen, for example, at International Association Chiefs of Police Conference where they have 3D analysis, where you're doing time, geography, and people all at the same time. Until you kind of see it in front of you, you go, holy smokes. So it's on the horizon. We had to play a bit of catch up with our analytics piece, but we're certainly on that road. And we really do look forward to doing those kind of analytics. And I think that will eliminate kind of the, one of a better term, gross analysis that comes without kind of the finer points of what that really means. But the purpose of that slide was, are we seeing reductions in crime? That was the tool. We wanted to see those reductions.
And through you, Madam Chair, from that point of view, it's excellent news. I'd hate for that, I guess, inaccurate perception to be publicized publicly, particularly through the renaissance we're going through presently, and that we're so proud of. Having said that, on the same front, if you look at, based on what I've concluded, calls for service equals the number of police officers that are working in that area. Hence, the rationale for those numbers in the core. Through you, Madam Chair, is that correct?
In part, as I say, it's one of the factors. We do know, for example, the caseload, and Councillor Whitehead spoke to it. The caseload that our people handle is quite large, both in terms of, I'll call it back-end investigations, where we're looking at crimes against seniors, probably a good example, the number of cases they carry, but also on the front end. And I know that people who come from other services who come to our service say, holy smokes, you guys ever do a lot of work. Well, we do, and Councillor White has recognized that in terms of the contribution of our frontline officers, which I agree with. They're working hard. We're a fairly lean organization, but we're also, I've often used the analogy of the Canadian military. We don't have the helicopters and the Humvees and everything else. Canadian military gets the job done. They have to plow through with the resources they have. They develop skill sets to do that work when they don't have all the other bells and whistles. And it's just my opinion, but I think our people do the same thing. Like, how do we get through the work? How do we solve these things with the tools and the equipment that we have and the people?
So I guess the bottom line is if that red marking was on the mountain, the same would be said about the allocation of officers that were dispatched in that area. So from a good news standpoint, from Councillor Whitehead's perspective, I think it's important to recognize that his neighborhood, and this is very positive, is that doesn't have the same calls for service, hence the same problems. Hence, that's something he should be applauding, and so should that community. And I'll exchange that at any given time if we could actually accomplish that. So I think that's an important variable that needs to be communicated. And also the fact that just because that activity is prevalent in that area doesn't necessarily reflect the residents or the neighborhoods, but of the activity. And if we can really emphasize today, because I'd hate to wake up tomorrow and read that in our daily, or weekly, or read it online for that matter, or see it on television. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And sorry, just a quick comment on that, if I can, Madam Chair. An excellent point. That was the intent, and you've articulated it for us. It is a good news story. You have to be careful, and I certainly see it from these slides, of the stigmatization of neighborhoods. And we've wrestled with this for a number of years in terms of release of this data. And if you recall, a number of years back, the public wanted us to release all the data. It comes with exactly, as you said, some of these stigmatization issues, and then, well, I'm not moving there, it's a bad neighborhood. It isn't necessarily, nor are the residents. So you have to be thoughtful, I agree, with how you release that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Conley.
Hey, thank you. First of all, I just want to thank you for presenting here. I think you've done a great job, and most of my involvement is with the East End Station because I represent Stony Creek and Lower Stony Creek. And I appreciate doing the ride around with the police officer. I learn a lot about my neighborhood doing that. I think it's a good two-way street in that I can tell him things that I know because I've lived there so long. So I think it's a great program, and I appreciate you allowing us to do it because they probably are bored of their wits when they're going with us, but I do appreciate that.
No, I don't think so. We'd like to think they're on their toes, but go ahead.
Mine is mostly around traffic, speed, and there's two things. One, the expressway has been talked about, but I do see in your budget request for $830,000 for the expressway. I'm assuming that's the Lincoln Red Hill Expressway.
Yeah, and sorry, just for clarity, that was, as I said, this presentation is what the board got for consideration. That money was not included, and what we've been tasked with through the board is to come back and look at some alternate solutions, which we'll be presenting to the board next month. Okay. So it's actually not in the budget, that money.
No, I know it's not in the budget, but it was a request in order to monitor the expressway properly. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, it was a consideration and a suggestion, but not acted on fully at that point. As the deputy has said, we want to do a 60-day study so we had better data to look at how we would deploy. So this was a preliminary because it was presented to the board in December.
And I'm sorry, the 60 days is up when?
That began through you, Deputy?
The POP project began, I believe it was on the 16th or 17th of December, and it'll be moving forward to the board meeting in February, and we'll have data at that point in time, and then we'll make a determination what we decide to do moving forward after that board meeting.
Okay. Because I really have, as Councillor Jackson said, noticed a lot more police enforcement on those two expressways, and I think it has made a difference. I can just see it when I'm driving down, and I'd hate to see any less enforcement that's going on. In fact, I'd still like to see more enforcement, but I just don't understand why two streets in Hamilton are getting exempted and getting $830,000 to take care of them when every other street in Hamilton gets taken care of. It's just that this is an expressway that we built. So it bothers me that we're even suggesting it should be $800,000 or more to take care of it when it's part of our city anyways. It's just probably the busiest, it is the busiest roads in the whole city. I think the last I heard is around 60,000 cars a day. And it's just going up because of all the population. So I really hope you have a really close look at that. And the enforcement has to be there. I know we are doing some safety measures. I got no idea when that's going to be done, but I'll ask that later, because I look every week to see if anything's happening on what we passed. And I don't see anything, so it kind of disappoints me a bit. Other than that, as other councilors said, every street in my area I get a complaint over sometime. People speeding, and a perfect example is Paramount Drive last week with a 141-kilometer driver. The other one was on Stone Church in Paramount where the collision and there was a death in the last 6 or 8 months.
Yep.
You know, so it is very important that we get a handle on this. And I do know when I phone down to the station, say, look, I had a complaint on XYZ Street. There's an officer out there the next day or two, and I really do appreciate the effort that the police department is doing. I know they can't be everywhere at all times, but at least making a 3 or 4 hour exposure to the situation really helps. My question to you though is, how can we help as a city help you? In other words, what kind of calming effects do you think would work? What kind of, I know on King Street we put up some monitors that even tells you the speed limit. I've got 2 of them up in my area. Does that really help traffic slow down, or is it just us making us feel good?
Yeah, it really is a 3-pronged approach through you, Madam Chair, and the deputy referred to it already, education, enforcement, and engineering for traffic solutions. So it is a tripartite. We do work with city traffic and have, whether it's redesign of intersections, things like that. You've just described, how vast the number of streets are. It's a huge cost. I get that. I'd love to speak to the Red Hill and Link, but I think in fairness to the board, we need to bring that report back to them first so they can take a position. But one thing is, we know it's not sustainable. I know that Councillor Whitehead talked about POP projects. This is a POP project that is, has an end date. And when we deploy resources in one area, obviously then we don't have the resources for the other area. So it's a competing demands, and I get that. But those 3, to your question, does it help? Yes. The engineering is one piece of it. I mean, the province is probably not going to go with photo radar. My personal opinion, photo radar would work because I've seen it when I've been driving in New Brunswick and people slow down and drive the speed limit because you see the cameras out there. So, but that's a whole other political.
So do you, through the chair, do you do recommendations to traffic or engineering saying, look, if we did more the electronic monitoring on certain streets, that helps. In general, that helps, or doesn't. We still have to make the decision to put them on. We're not suggesting you say put them on there, put them on there, put them on there. But do you do that?
We work with city traffic, but we don't make the recommendations or direct them in their actions. But we do work as a collaborative, yes.
I kind of wish you would, not to say you have to do it, but to say if you did it, this could help us, because we can't be everywhere at all times. And it would help. So I'm just suggesting to you, if you have any ideas, I would appreciate that you would tell our traffic department or engineering that these things seem to work. And from that, we can make, obviously in each area, each ward councillor would make decisions on if to do it and when to do it and how much it costs. So.
Yeah, maybe it's a suggestion, much like the request for CPC centers. We'd be happy to meet with you in your own area and look at specifically the traffic initiatives that we do. Our support services often integrates those pieces, but yeah, they can tell you how it works, how we work with city traffic. We also work with public health, whether it was seat belts and child seats, so a whole range of initiatives. And we had a traffic safety initiative through Hart Solomon at the city before he retired that we were all signatories to and worked on for a number of years with those 3 prongs.
So maybe offline then we can Not necessarily you and I, but the police department can
Certainly.
get together with
Yeah, I'd give you somebody more experienced in the area.
traffic. Well, you're too busy to do that. And
That's not too busy. It's having the information.
Do that. I really thank you for this presentation, and 2.79 looks like a good budget for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Vanderbeek, who's not in the room in chambers. I'm going to go to Councillor Collins next, and we'll catch Councillor Vanderbeek when she returns, and then I have Mayor Eisenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Chief. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions related to airport and port security. And so I think we're all aware of the fact that many of the crimes that you've put up today in many of the categories are related to drugs. And we're a community certainly that has a major airport. We rely on the port for a lot of goods to come in and out of the city. And certainly there have always been criminal elements that infiltrate not just ports across Canada, but airports as well. And I understand that since 9/11 that a lot of regulations have changed, and there's certainly more scrutiny and more enforcement, certainly in the airline industry. But I've always been fascinated with the fact that, you know, we see some very high-profile busts in other communities in terms of Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. It's almost a regular occurrence. And we don't see that here. And I wonder what kind of working relationship we have with whether it's the OPP, Transport Canada, the Port Authority even, who has their own security force, Canada Border Services Agency, who obviously plays a proactive role in trying to crack down on the drug trade. And so where in your budget are the resources associated with enforcing what comes into the community through the port and through the airport to limit, we're never going to stop it, but limit the amount of illegal drugs that come into this community?
Yeah, so first of all, I sat on the committee for the CACP, the Aviation Security Committee meeting, but we also have, that was at a kind of a policy and strategic level, but we also had generally the inspector from Division 3 sit on the operational component of that committee. So that involves CBS, the carriers, RCMP, OPP, a whole amalgamation. It was actually Julian Fantino that chaired that committee and started it, recognizing the gaps. Some of that has evolved to the work that we do through our provincial anti-terrorism now at the provincial level for the mechanics of how you share information. So it's evolved in those years since terrorism became much more funded, I'll say. We're classified as a level 2 airport. We had funding in place for a number of years, as you know, where we had officers deployed through that funding specifically for the airport. That came to an end about 3-4 years ago, and we've had to assume the duties for that through our regular patrol. So were that grant to become available again, we would certainly, take advantage of that. Also for the National Port Enforcement Team, we had officers funded for that. That is since the RCMP has taken a different approach and decided not to fund that. And they're taking a different approach to how they're funding, particularly border communities like Niagara, where you're on a direct border to the U.S.
How would the cargo then be inspected if we use the airport as the example?
Up where we are, largely through the agencies that already exist there, so CBSA and other security agencies. We have looked at information sharing as a big piece because you're dealing not only with government agencies, but you're dealing with private carriers. So there's some difficulties in terms of that. Generally speaking, when it's public safety, we can articulate methodology as why we get the information sharing that we do. That happens regularly, and we've been called up a number of times for inspections. To your point, could there be more concerted effort with resources placed there? Certainly. We're not the scope of Pearson, who have dedicated not only officers, but other agencies that assist in that. It is something on the horizon. It was before the board when we looked at the funds being withdrawn from those officers. And again, another ask for, 5 or 10 bodies, whatever it would require, that becomes pressures on the budget yet again. So,
are there statistics included in your mapping exercise in terms of, arresting someone at the airport who's smuggling or the fact that you've seized, contraband materials or illegal drugs, whatever you want to deem it as. Is that all included, or is it because it's maybe enforced by another agency, it doesn't fall under the umbrella of your statistics?
It's actually both what you said, which we don't have that capacity yet. It is on the horizon potentially as we get into our crime analytics piece. But yes, other agencies are often involved in that, whether our CMP are contacted directly, depending on the nature of what the issue was. And importation, it may fall to their mandate, as you say. It may be ours. Is it an act of terrorism? That's a whole other thing. We have white powder incidents. They're not tracked specifically for that purpose report, no.
How can we be assured then, Chief, through you, Madam Chairman, and sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to lose the airport issue first before we go on to the port. How can we be assured that, in fact, there are enough resources if we're relying on other levels of government and it's directly impacting your operation because you and your staff are the ones that, once those materials make their way onto Hamilton streets and elsewhere, you clean up the mess?
Yes.
So how can we be assured that, in fact, there are enough resources at the airport in particular to proactively guard our community against what we know is happening everywhere in Canada, but if some areas are receiving more resources and enforcement than others, then we'd become an obvious target if there's less here. I mean, the criminal elements know which ones are easier than others. We've seen, or at least I've read in the national media, instances now where small rural-type airfields are becoming very popular in terms of making drops because they're not on the radar screen and there's no security. So I wonder how we can be proactively part of the conversation, whether it's advocating for more resources, as you've just suggested. We've had them at one time, they've been taken away, or whether it means even just becoming part of the conversation as to how HPS staff plays a proactive role as a partner in terms of tackling that problem at the airport.
Right, and to your point, and as you know, and I'll leap over to the port security, Senator Kenney visited many areas across Canada looking at port security and identified a need there as well. We were working with the RCMP on our national port enforcement team, but again, it's a drop in the bucket relative to the need, not only for us, and we're a fairly large port, right? I believe it's 7th largest in Canada. That's an issue, but to your point, who has jurisdiction? It's largely the feds that have jurisdiction. Now, it's a little different because we're in the harbor, but nonetheless, there's these competing resources. I can't give you a definitive, be calm, all citizens, everything will be fine. There's work to be done in this, no doubt, and there's resources that should be applied.
But politically, I've never heard anyone locally, at least at the federal or provincial level, talk about port or airport security.
Only Senator Kenney, as I say, from a federal level, when he visited, it's probably about 3 or 4 years now.
So, but he's not a local rep, and we're not talking about the Hamilton situation in particular.
Right.
So, for me, it's about how do we become advocates and our political influence, whatever it might mean in terms of dealing with the province or the feds, to try to bolster the resources associated with that. And so, is there a way for us to, at some point in time in this forum, receive information in terms of how we compare to other jurisdictions, whether it be the port or the airport, for drug arrests, confiscation of stuff that's it's in a container. We don't know who it's come from, but we've captured it, and we've prevented it from making its way onto the streets. I mean, I don't know how big the problem is locally, and I don't know whether or not we're not seeing those high-profile cases here because it's because there's a lack of enforcement or resources, or whether it's just because we're not receiving as much material as others. And so I'm kind of in a position where I don't have a lot of information, but again, as someone who follows the media and the national media, it's happening everywhere. It has to be happening here. I just don't know to what extent, and maybe, and because it's another jurisdiction, you're probably not the best person to ask, but you have, as you said, those partnerships with others, and I wonder how we might receive a presentation on that issue in particular.
Yeah, and to your point, you make a good one. We wouldn't have all the information. Much of it would rely with other organizations and their capacity to want to share that, or the politics behind that. I get that. That would require fairly concerted effort to get those partners at the table. Are they willing to share the information? And then how would we present that? But we don't have all the information, to your point, so we can't just say, well, I can generate a report, give you an informed answer. It would have to be multi-layered in terms of all the organizations that handle. And that's what I found when I had at those committee meetings, just how involved it was, who does what, who has jurisdiction for what, who pays for what, and what resources they have. I mean, I only know from our personal experience, we found it helpful when we had officers dedicated up there.
Way for HPS staff to at least provide us a briefing or an information report that would suggest here are the levels of enforcement and the resources that we currently have in the port and at the airport, and maybe give us a brief synopsis in terms of where we were years ago. It seems like we had higher levels of security in both instances. I think there used to be a joint task force, but there was a multi-agency body that used to work on the harbor as well, and that, I believe, in the mid-90s was taken away. And so I wonder if you can just give us a brief snapshot of the lay of the land currently and how it may have changed for better or for worse over time.
And certainly we would funnel that through the board, as you know. But there's opportunity there. I don't see it coming next month, but yes, I understand. Yeah.
When time and resources permit.
Understood.
Thanks for that, Chief. I appreciate the information, and thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through you to the Deputy Chief, the Acting Chief.
Okay, it's just cameo appearance.
Well, I too would like to thank you for the presentation. It's always quite enlightening to be reminded of the things that are taking place in the police service. I just a couple of comments and a kind of a question. So I want to express some appreciation for the crime manager that we have, Peter Hall. He has, in my estimation, been outstanding. And in our community policing center, we have an officer by the name of Chris Hicks, who I have to tell you has made a significant impact on the Dundas downtown community. And just on behalf of the merchants down there and the residents who know what she does, I would like to say thank you to you and to her publicly, because we very much appreciate her attention to the downtown, her manner, and her presence on the street. She makes it a point to be around and deal with issues as they come up rather than waiting for things to happen. So I want to recognize her. We have a specific issue in town, and I've been working with city staff along with Chris Hicks and Peter Hall and Kevin Beta and his team. And they have definitely gone the extra mile in addressing the issues that I've brought to them, and I'm very grateful for that. So having said that, I want to focus on the Dundas Community Policing Center. A few months ago, there was a temporary closure of that center, which brought to the fore a concern in Dundas that it may be at risk at some point. So just following up on the conversation and discussion around Councillor Partridge's questions, I guess what I'm wondering is whether policing centers are a part of the process that you're going through, looking at things, and I didn't quite follow whether, or didn't get out of that discussion, whether you would be looking at the current policing centers or whether you're only looking at where you might need new ones. So I guess that's my sort of question and comment, that there is increased concern in Dundas that we may, our policing center might be at risk, and we are really appreciative of it, and aware that, some of the criteria for that is sort of how many people come in. But in many cases, it's a sense of safety and being able to deal with Chris Hicks even on the street. So I'll just ask that question. Is the Dundas Community Policing Center part of that discussion? Do I need to be following up with someone, and who would that be, if so?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. However, we look at all our assets that are deployed in terms of effectiveness. That's part of the whole evidence-based and how we approach deployment. So that's always on the horizon. But I do know for the specific example you provided, that was miscommunication. What it was somebody backfilling for a day or two into front line because of staffing issues, coming out of Pan Am, and a few other reasons. It's quite complex, but in any event, that was a very short term. It came out as, oh, they're closing. No, we weren't closing the center. And to your point about, and I've worked in Dundas, so I understand the community and kind of how it works, as had many of our senior command. It's a different dynamic there. And Chris was deliberately picked for that branch. She's a seasoned officer with lots of experience, whether it's Ghost, a number of areas she's worked in throughout her career. I'll just say those are coveted officers because, of course, they have skills to make things happen and solve things. We really like our officers to be all like that, too. So we've obviously dedicated, no, we're not looking at closing that center. However, we always look at the efficacy of these centers, and because with competing resources, where are they best deployed? And in that situation, for that short period, we reached a place where we were not in a position to staff the front lines. We had to staff the front line first. And that's the tension that exists. There's many ways we can approach both for quality of life and allocating the resources, but the tension is when you've got the emergency calls, you have to have people to respond to them because there's all kinds of liabilities that way. So, no. However, it's always in the works, so to speak, about, is it resources well spent? Is it human resources well spent? We're always looking at that. And I know we've worked through with Councillor Jackson for the CPC Centre on Concession Street, which is quite contentious. But again, much like you've described, the goal is to have that presence in the interaction with the community, not just have a physical place. So I think we need to stay focused on what the citizens want and how they feel, like you say, about feelings of safety and quality of life. And, I'd much rather run into an officer on the street and have a 5-minute conversation than I would that I have to go to the CPC Centre for that particular reason. I'm dealing with a volunteer. It's different. So there's all those competing needs. But no, we weren't looking at closing the Dundas station.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Eisenberger.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick issues. First of all, thanks. Your stamina is great today. You're answering all the questions from members of council appropriately, and really want to congratulate the service and the board for coming up with, I think, one of the best budgets that the service has seen. And notwithstanding all the issues that we have here, we're still from my sense of it, and I'm not asking for more, but from a per capita basis, we're doing more with less than most other municipalities of similar size on a per capita basis, which I think is a testament to the great hard work that the frontline service and staff generally are doing in our community, and I think that's fantastic. So congratulations to all of you, and the chair and the board, I think, have come with not what we used to do, where it used to have happened, which was start at a very high point and work our way down, hopefully, to a level that was somewhat acceptable. We're actually delivering, from my perspective, almost virtually a maintenance budget. The salaries are driving the costs. Yes, we can respond more in many other places, but it means more person power to do that. So I think we've kind of reached a nice balance. And I think that's wonderful. I want to touch on the data analytics map, which I would agree, sort of skews the impression of what's happening in our city in a kind of a negative way. But I do understand that more granular the data analysis will help address that, where it breaks it down even more. We'll potentially see more blue in the lower city as opposed to all red. So the sooner we can do that, the better. I think that would be very helpful. And today is Bell or hashtag Bell Let's Talk Day. And one of the things that I've been proudest of from the previous chief's work and the staff and all of the deputies is the focus on mental health. It is a real great positive leap towards not only the broader community mental health response, which I'm going to ask you to kind of talk about for a second. I think that's really important, but also in terms of the mental health of the service itself, which I think is of paramount importance. Policing is a very difficult endeavor and can be very mentally challenging, and having the right processes in place to respond to that is good for not only all of the service, but good for the community at large. So can you touch a little bit on what Coast is doing? I mean, you've got the slide up here, the mobile crisis response, how you're responding to that, what the difference is today as opposed to before. And, you know, when we're talking about hashtag Bill Let's Talk, it is all about removing the stigma and getting to a point where we're treating mental health as a disease as opposed to a crime, quite frankly. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's a very important change to how we're responding to mental health crisis issues in it.
Agreed, and it's been multifaceted. If you got to see the Hold Your Fire documentary that was on this week and touched on many of these issues, but we really are on the forefront, some deliberate, some not. I talked about Dr. Antidormi earlier, which really was the genesis of the COAST program 17 years ago. So we had the death of a young boy stabbed to death by a person with mental health issues, and led to the formation at that time of the Crisis Outreach and Support Team. So kind of the next generation is not just going after the call to do the follow-up, it's the emergency response, which MCERT is. They go to 911 calls where there's imminent danger, either the person or other persons, with a mental health worker, with the officer. One of the things the board has done, and we were the first in Canada as far as I understand, certainly the province, to have conducted energy weapons deployed to our front lines so we have less lethal force available at those calls. So it really is multifaceted. We want de-escalation. We want peaceful resolution. We do not want to shoot people, contrary to what may be portrayed in the media. We don't want that. We want the person treated for the illness, taken in safely, nobody else harmed, and that's a desirable outcome. If it comes to a state where lethal force has to be used because somebody's life is at risk, we're also equipped for that, but it's certainly not our first choice. So as we expand these options, and even in the short snippet on Hold Your Fire, you can see the reactions of people to a mental health worker who's not in uniform and what the uniform means. But we're in an emergency response, so they still need to know that you've got the police officer there, you've got the mental health worker, but the goal, again, we're clear on the goals. From an internal perspective, for many years, and we've done post-analysis on suicides within our workplace and developed more comprehensive response, but again, through the work of the deputy, looking at, and the board approved this, those 3 tiers of, prevention, intervention, and postvention. And then we're looking to the broader community as well with what's going on, where that means a psychiatrist on staff or access to that. Even in the bargaining this year, we looked at those benefits that would allow our employees to get access to whether it's psychological or psychiatric services. That's another component. It's very multifaceted. The other thing we've done in-house is the Road to Mental Readiness, which is basically a military model for looking at what is your state of mental health, almost as a diagnostic piece to say, where are you? We've done the Safe Talk. We've done the assist training. We're looking at broad approaches, both internal and external, to the issues of mental health, and I see addictions on the horizon as well. So it really is, to your point, it's been evolving through the years. It probably is the most comprehensive. Having said that, I don't wish it to go bad and look like we're bragging about, we got everything completely in order. We don't, but we have better responses to ensure that we're not escalating, that we have peaceful resolution. And for internal wellness as well, people coming to work because they're well is good for all of us, certainly the person in particular. But to your point, there are demanding issues in this job and things that our members see and accumulate. So we want to develop a more robust system, and I know the board has moved in that direction. And in this year's budget, to get us that wellness piece, it's all part of it. So I appreciate the work of the board too.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really important, positive progression, I think, for the service. It's going to save lives, I think. It's about serve and protect, and I know that's the mission of every police officer out there. And as you say, no one wants to shoot or get shot, quite frankly. And, so when mental health issues are the issue, it requires a different kind of response. And I think we're seeing some dramatic change in terms of incarceration in those areas as well. So that's a very positive step. So thank you for all that great work and a good budget. And hopefully we'll get this approved shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. I had Councillor Aidan Johnson, who is not in chambers. I have Councillor Green, second time, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and I'd like to apologize. I'll actually defer to the first-time speaker, to Councillor Johnson, if he'd like to sit down and have his say.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. I apologize. I was dealing with another matter in there while listening to the Mayor's questions. So I have two questions in their brief. The first question is going to begin with a thank you through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and that's a thank you for the mental health program that our Hamilton Police have introduced, partnering mental health workers with our officers on the streets so that we have mental health workers on site to deal with mental health issues and indeed crises when they manifest in our policing. And I was hoping I could get an update from Deputy Chief Gert while he's here about the progress of that program, next steps, and relevant funding. And but that question was just asked, Councillor Green is telling me, so I apologize if I missed the question. Cancel that. My question hereby...
I'll take the compliment, though. Thank you, Councillor.
Precisely right. My question hereby simply transmutes into a thank you. So, and I apologize for not hearing the question in the other room. So the second question, therefore my only question, is about McMaster University. And I've had this conversation with former Chief DeCare, who's now working on security on campus, about the fact that in our McMaster neighborhoods, burglary is an extremely common occurrence. Theft is an extremely common occurrence. Other crimes too. However, the two I'm really focusing on are the set of related crimes I'm really focusing on in this question is the burglary and theft related set of crimes. It is the case that students don't report these crimes often. And through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to our Deputy Chief, the reason why they don't report the crime, or there are many reasons why they don't report the crimes, including lack of understanding about the right procedure to follow, conviction that their stuff is gone, so what's the point? And that's problematic, as you know, Madam Deputy Mayor, precisely because it leads to impoverished statistics. Right now, the official statistics about crime in the McMaster neighborhoods are not showing the reality of how frequent these burglaries are. And basically, through you to our Deputy Chief, I would like to request that we meet sometime soon to talk about how we can engage students more, basically to get students reporting crime more and serving as better conduits for justice and good policing within our McMaster neighborhoods. And so through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'd like to request simply a comment on that, how we can do better in our student community to ensure safety for students and non-students both who live in the McMaster neighborhoods, and address the very unique situation there around crime in West Hamilton, specifically the McMaster communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. We certainly support that. The crime prevention at any time, as I mentioned earlier, we're fully in support of. We do have an advantage with Chief DeCare, who also supports crime prevention. But we worked with the BIA out in Westdale a number of times. In fact, did a business plan a number of years back through Inspector Raston at the time. If we coordinate those resources again with you on board, with McMaster on board, and get avenue and opportunities with the students directly, if that's who you feel needs to get the information, by all means. And we have a crime prevention branch that would work towards those ends. It really meets the needs. We talked about the core duties under policing services, and crime prevention is number one. So we're definitely on board with your impetus and ability to push that issue as well. We're certainly on board. We do want increased reporting, as you saw one of the slides talked about that. We're all for that, because then we can go out and solve the crimes. It's not like we're saying, well, we don't want to told because then we'll look better. It's not about that. It's about getting the bad guys committing the offenses. So, and there are, to your point, lots of reasons why people make the decisions they do for reporting or not. Whether it's, I can't pay the insurance, I don't have insurance, I'll just count it as a loss. They're looking at their immediate circumstances, but not the larger dynamic, which you're talking about, is it happening? Do we know the crime trends? We know that when it's reported, and it helps us solve the problem. So definitely, yeah, we can get you together with a number of our people, and I'm sure Chief DeCare would be on board, now Glenn DeCare. By all means.
Thank you for that. And anecdotally, I can report that while Sergeant Caramoli is missed in Ward 1, he did a fabulous job. Sergeant Gill is going over like gangbusters in Ward 1, and she's done a great job reaching out to our neighborhood associations and letting them know the safety protections that are in place through the police. So just feedback through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Sergeant Gill is a hit in Ward 1. And I will look at the videotape later for the answer to the question, read the mental health worker question, and if I have any follow-up concerns or questions, I'll get in touch.
Oh, no, we're happy to discuss it. It's nothing like that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the time that both gentlemen have stood up at the front. I'm sure you've been in long trials that are also been as grueling, if not more. So this is probably nothing. But I did want to go on the record right now and apologize for the earlier interruption. We were having a vigorous debate as to the purpose of this conversation, and I thought in my second round of questioning I would ask through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, really, Council has no ability to change this budget as it stands right now. Is that true? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to...
Well, actually, I'm going to direct that to Mr. McMullen. Brian?
Through the chair, yeah, it's my understanding that council, there is a process that we'd have to follow legally through the Police Services Act.
And I think why that's important, because as we're having these deliberations around budget, representing 20%, almost 19%, almost 20% of our budget, over $150 million, this is probably one of our only opportunities to engage directly in this, aside from having delegations at the police board. I think it's important, Madam Deputy Mayor, that members of public, media present, all fully understand that this budget has been approved and there's very little at this point that we can do about it. However, playing a hypothetical game, in the event that council did come back to you, Acting Chief Gert, and said, other boards and agencies, where would you be able to find efficiencies in terms of where you've allocated some of your resources now?
Yeah, so I have a couple answers to the question. First of all, you do have the legal right as council to decline the budget. That is an option. It's not a done deal. Council can do that. So it's not approved just because the board does. Secondarily, if you were to say no to that, it's not me that would reply to that. It's the board, because this is the board's budget, not the police chief's budget. And this is the purpose of today, is to present the board's budget as approved by them. Lastly, with a 1%, and I'm hoping through the rather voluminous slides here, we've demonstrated that we are constantly keeping in mind how to do reductions, how to do better business, how to gain efficiencies, how to do business better through cooperative efforts, through other agencies. I mean, just look at the MCERT. We're getting funding, which is not just a one-year deal, through Lynn for $500,000 for a mental health worker. They profit by it, we profit by it. It's money well spent from both sides, in my opinion, and leads to better care for our community. So we're on board with that all the time in terms of looking those efficiencies, whether it's the software that we use, whether it's the equipment we look at, whether it's cooperative purchasing, ways to save money, we're looking at it all the time. If I had a 1%, like a 1.79 you're asking for right up top, we would have presented that today.
So just so that there's no confusion, although I can appreciate the theoretical answer regarding these budgets, through you back to Mr. McMullen, what is the likelihood of a city council turning down a budget and having any success through arbitration to have any kind of control over the budget, just so that the general public doesn't have any misconceptions? What's the likelihood of that happening? What's the precedent, Mr. McMullen?
So if I can, through you, Chairman, we don't know is the short answer. I mean, we can certainly look into it as to what, if any, precedence there is around this, but I don't think we could give you an answer that you can hang your hat on.
Okay.
Sorry, perhaps what I could do is refer the councillor to the Niagara decision, where it was contested and did go to arbitration. And that decision came out about 2 years ago, where it was contested both by the region and it did go to arbitration. So that's on the web. Just have to check the arbitration site and you can see what happened in that case.
And was the region successful?
It was not.
So the precedent has been set that there's a little likelihood that, but I'll move on from that. It's a hypothetical exercise. I was looking to see if, like all other agencies, just so you're aware, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, this is not something that's unique. It's not a question that's unique to you or the police service. I've asked this to every single agency that comes forward in terms of looking for efficiencies, lean processes as we've had through our city here. I did want to, though, however, comment on some of the previous questions regarding heat maps. I do think it's very necessary for us to have an open, clear, and honest conversation around where crime happens. To couch it, to make us feel better, I don't think is effective. I'd rather have a much open, honest conversation, know what's happening, and then talk about why, where, and how we can make those changes. There's also been conversations through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, around mental health. If for a moment you can comment on internal policies as they relate to your officers and program that you have in place regarding the mental health and support for your officers. This was a question that came up at your previous budget through Councillor Conley. I'd like to
Thank you, Acting Chief, and through you, Madam Chair. There's a couple of new initiatives that we've undertaken, Councillor, in the last 12 months after a deep analysis of the current programs and what to in their wellness, both from a physical and a psychological perspective at work. And the first one focuses around the education pieces, which Acting Chief Gert has accurately reflected. And that has been an ongoing process that we've undertaken for many years now, and it started shortly after the COAST program with the CIT training that we began to initiate for all of our frontline officers. And we are currently around the 50% range for our frontline officers. All have had CIT training, which is crisis intervention training, assisting them in responding to calls for persons in crisis. The new programs that we've initiated and implemented this year, the first one I want to talk about is a peer support program. This is a new initiative for the Hamilton Police Service. We just identified the individuals. We have a 20-person team. Those individuals were identified in September. It's a volunteer position. They began their training in November, and we have some folks that will be attending some training next week, and some more timelines will be coming forward for the peer support team. That is a peer formal team, but we also have the informal team of every member within our service who is a peer and is in a position to provide advice and counseling to individuals and assist them with a number of the nuances that they experience through the police service in their employment. The other aspect that we're working on is identifying chapels within our facilities. The three divisions. This came to the command table in the fall, and there's unanimous support around the table to have chapels within our facilities, so that our three main facilities, Division 10, Division 20, and Division 30, so our officers and civilians would have a place that they could go to collect themselves, to worship, to connect with a higher being, or connect internally, whatever that issue might be for them at that particular time. The other aspect of the new review from a prevention piece is to take all of the units and oversight to bring it now under one centralized area. That way we would have a coordinated effort where it would be complete communication, nothing would get lost, nothing would get dropped along in communication, so that ones to the family night where they have direct access to our EFAP providers, psychologists, psychiatrists, as well as our own members who are there to be as part of a panel to address some of the issues that they have had in their experiences and some of the help and support that they've been able to outreach and get support for, to assist them through those trials and tribulations that occur over time in their exposure through our careers. I can go on a number of different fronts. I can tell you that we've probably got about 7 or 8 different programs in place right now, supporting on the 3 pillars of prevention, intervention, and post-vention follow-up, with the dedicated resources through human resources from return to work specialists, from WSAB specialists, from health and safety and fitness coordinator, that it's a lateral influx of staff to support persons in crisis with the goal of increasing resiliency to improve their wellness at work, at home, so that they're able to be more in a position to contribute better while they're at work and live a higher quality of life.
I really appreciate the fullness of that answer. I'm not clear, and I was just sitting in the other room and asking that question, that any of that information was brought up previously. So if I missed that, I know the suggestion was made. You already answered that question. I didn't hear it. There was a second part to that question, Madam Deputy Mayor, and that was the cost of officers on long-term disability based on mental health. They just care to comment on that.
Yes, and it's fluctuating. It depends on, and it's a diagnostic piece. Is the member's absence due to PTSD when that's been formalized? Is it stress? Is it other factors in the home? So to give you a quantified, here's the dollar figure, I can't do that. And it is complex. And as the deputy has said, his was a more robust answer. I was providing an overview to what we're doing internally and externally. As he stated, we can go on at length, both with the history of what we've done as an organization. So we're certainly paying attention to the issue. We're trying to make the changes, and as I stated, the board has supported us. And in this particular budget, we have hires here who will deal with that wellness piece. Our goal is to get them back to work, to realize savings by having them come back to work. And obviously that's good for us and good for them. And that's our goal. But to give you a dollar figure off the top, no. Do we know that it's costing many agencies, not just us? Yes. Both for the mental health aspect. Is it exacerbated by the nature of the issues that we deal with? Yes. So how that resiliency works and what it looks like, also difficult to cost out what you've prevented. So we're investing in it as the board. They are doing that. And we will obviously track that. And we're trying to get more people back to work.
I think the point for me, Madam Deputy Mayor, is that while we're touting the programs, which are great, Coast, I know personally, fantastic programs, outward supports of mental health in the community, that it's also important we don't lose sight of the tragedies that have happened internally in the police service, and that we're also giving the same kind of supports. And I apologize again. I know the suggestion was made that you had answered that. I didn't hear it. Certainly, Mr. Weatherhall answered it in fullness. And there's just one quick statement with regards to some of the traffic safety issues that were brought up by a previous speaker. The motion that I did bring regarding Vision Zero called for a joint task force that would include Hamilton Police Services with our planning boards to be able to address these things. So in the fullness of the motion that I brought yesterday, that will be addressing some of the needs that were brought up a little bit earlier regarding some of the problem areas in their communities. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Whitehead. 2 quick questions.
One is, and I remember talking to Marco, and I think there's a Councillor Green may have asked this question. My understanding that there's a number of municipalities that actually provide legal support through their legal divisions. So I think we need to flush out the different models that currently exist. But clearly, just to say what every chief has in the Big 12 has a lawyer is not, I mean, it might be a bit misleading. We need to determine who's providing that support and how it's being provided. So I just want to provide clarity on that. The other one is a number of years ago, and I see Toronto's really starting to look at it more and more. There's a lot of services that can overlap when you look at economies of scale. And that is like, again, legal services. We've already identified some areas already providing it through the city. We're looking at financial, because there's a lot of interaction between the city and the police services when it comes to financial. I did ask a number of years ago, and I haven't seen anything since, whether we should start going down that road, maybe with a consultant to determine if there would be any net savings by where there's synergies between the city and the police services. So what is the status, or have we moved on that, or are we observing other centres that appear to be moving in that direction?
I'll leave that to you. It was a comment you made during board meeting. I take the direction of the board, so if the board chooses to do that, we certainly do that. But we don't generate a report on the basis of a comment. We look at that section both for finance and HR. We are tapped into PeopleSoft through the city as administering both our pay. And so we are looking at those economies already. There have been a number of downloading that have happened from the city to us through the course of the last 10 years. And we have reported on that to the board. So, pending discussion of the board in terms of reference, we're more than happy to do that.
on that. It could go to fleet, it could go to maintenance, it can go to some of the administration, the non-sworn officer type administration. It can go to finance, it could go to HR, it can go to legal. So I think there's a wide gamut. Now, some you would rule out right away because of the Police Service Act and certain responsibilities. I understand that. But I think at many other communities, or not many, but a number of communities are starting to have that discussion. I want to highlight that there may be some opportunity of savings if at least we explore it. May come back and say, you know what, it creates more challenges, and that's fine. But I think it's at least worth looking at.
Yeah, and as a general term of reference, because I was on the field support side, we looked at what are our comparators like in other jurisdictions, and we are the smallest HR, we are the smallest finance, we have one legal person and an assistant. That is the scope of the operation. So if we're talking about 10 or 12 people, notwithstanding your comments about the fleet and facilities, which Dan Bowman spoke to earlier, we're always looking for those economies of scale, and are they possible? So we have looked at internally, but if the board requires a more fulsome report, we can certainly give that.
Thank you, everyone. And on that, I have no further speakers. Excellent questions and answers. Appreciate it, Deputy. And I'm going to turn now to Councillor Ferguson. You have closing comment, and you're going to move to receive the presentation, sir.
That's correct, Madam Chairman. And let me just start by saying I have no questions. I asked a ton of questions pre-budget and during the budget at the board. Thank you. And believe me, I could tell council I lived up to my monikers, Frugal Fergie. We pushed back hard on the money. And that's why we're coming in, I think, with the lowest budget in 17 years, which I think we should all feel pretty good about. I do want to recognize that Madeline Levy is here, who is the vice chair of the board, so thank you for coming out today, Madeline. I would also like to recognize the two people up at the podium. They're both fill-ins. I don't think anybody would have predicted 4 weeks ago that our chief would have been retiring. And so typically you would see John Randazzo, the chief financial officer, up at the podium, but unfortunately his father died Monday, and the funeral is today. So I do want to thank Ted Mason for jumping in at the last second and carrying the financial side of this presentation. And to Eric, amazing job. I know you're presenting somebody else's report, because that's the exact same report that Glenn made to the board. And so I think you did an outstanding job today also on filling in on very little notice. I've never, in my career as a city councillor, heard Mike Zagaric come to the budget meeting and says, I need a motion to cut $1.5 million off my forecast, which was his forecast for police on Monday. You may recall that motion. And of course that carried pretty promptly. But despite coming in $1.5 million under Mike's report, we are hiring 7 new FTEs. 3 in the community mobilization branch, 1 for crimes against seniors, which is an ongoing problem. Didn't come up today, but the board's aware of it. Of course, helping victims of crime. And then as Councillor Green pointed out, what are we doing for member wellness? Well, we're putting 2.5 new people in human resources to deal with that issue. 90% of the budget is salaries and wages. We just settled a 5-year collective agreement. We went 3 years without a collective agreement with our officers, our unionized officers, and so we will have labor peace for the next 2 years because we cut a 5-year contract. And just on the question of, because I remember asking this exact same question when I heard, and this was back when police in 2013 were asking for almost 6% increase. And what happens if you push back? Well, you first refer it back to the board, and if the board move on it, you can appeal to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, but history has shown those have not been successful, as Councillor Green pointed out in the Niagara case as an example on that. So thank you for your great questions today, and thank you again to the presenters, and I'd like to move the presentation be received.
Moved by yourself, second by Councillor Terry Whitehead, and can you please extend condolences to John Randazzo as well on behalf of all of us at Council. Thank you. On that, all in favour? Carried. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go on now, and I apologize, and I'm going to turn to Councillor Jackson, but yesterday Councillor Jackson did indicate to me, and I think I responded around midnight last night, that he did indicate he wanted to put a motion on the floor at the end of presentations yesterday, and unfortunately I got it caught up and thought of another motion that he put on and missed him. My apologies, Councillor Jackson. He took it very hard. So I want to be sure for the public record that we did chat, and I have suggested to Councillor Jackson that his motion might be more appropriate at the GIC on February 3rd, and he's in agreement with that. So That's clear, so the clerk is aware of that. Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. Again, third time, my apologies. Are there any other notices of motions today? Seeing none. Any other general information or other business? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favour? And we'll see you Friday.